Welcome to the Elite FTS Table Talk Podcast with your host, Dave Tate.
All right, we are with Joe Bennett, the Hypertrophy coach. So before we get going, I know this is the question that you've been asked 100 times, because I know I've been asked 100 times, if not more. It's the question that everybody hates to answer, is like, tell me a little bit about yourself. So I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go more about what is your education in? Mm-hmm. So from say a training standpoint or just formal education standpoint, do you have a college degree? Did you go to school for the shit?
Yeah, I went to University of Florida. Honestly, I don't remember if I think my first year was business, and then my second year was pre-physical therapy, and then I switched to exercise science, and that's what I finished with. Really just because I liked working out, and that was about the extent of it. So I was like, oh, it's got the word exercise in it. That seems like a good idea. And I honestly, I'm just in high school and stuff, I was a good test taker. So I kind of wasted my first 2 or 3 years probably of college. And then I finally got involved with the strength and conditioning side of it there at the school. Got a job at the gym up there, started personal training up there. They had a great personal training program. They were kind of just starting then. So that was my first time I actually started to interact with the people running stuff. And I'm like, oh, these are normal people, graduate assistants and the people running the programs. And honestly, that was one of the first time where I have a very clear memory of when I was really, really emotionally attached to lots of stuff and being pissed off the first time I had this one graduate assistant teaching me something. And the short story of it is he was just kind of going through some of the considerations for bench press, flat barbell bench press. And at that point in time, I was just married to everything Arnold ever did. And so the fact that he was even implying that maybe someone shouldn't do it exactly the way that everybody else does it, I was literally sitting there pissed off. And over the course of getting to know that person for a couple months and realizing how much smarter he was than me and how he didn't give two shits about bench press or if he did or didn't do it or whatever, it was the first time I looked back and I was like, God, how stupid is it that I was attached to this, arbitrary thing like a bench press. And so anyway, that was a good point for me where I was not just going through things and completing things for the sake of completing things and actually starting to get to know people and build relationships. And obviously that's where you can actually learn and grow as a coach. Right outside of that, I got a job at a brief internship somewhere, but got offered a job at personal training. And the only reason I was hesitant in the first place to personal train is I didn't know you could actually make a living at it. I was engaged at that point in time, then right after I got a job, then married to my now wife. And so I was kind of just having this whole idea I had to be a grown-up and get a grown-up job. And I was well, working out's not a grown-up job. So I kind of got started in big box, a gym and personal training there. And I got I think I had ACE first, and then I had some NASM certification, just whatever looked good to get your foot in the door. And I got with some great people that taught me the business side of personal training basically. And I really got into that probably my first 3 or 4 years. I really didn't do any more continuing education after that. And just got
How long ago was this?
So I started training in 2006. That's when I started working for that company. So I trained a little bit in college, and then actually working for a big box company.
Yeah.
That was 2006, and I believe by 2008, I want to say I was managing a club, and so because I just had great peers that kind of taught me. I honestly, it sounds bad, but anyone in the industry, at the end of the day, people don't want to talk sales or talk business, but I'm you help 0% of the people that you actually don't get to work with. So at some point in time, you've got to have some value behind what you're doing, take people's money. It sounds bad, but it is what it is. And I like that part. I just like the fact that for me, it was all, if I'm a good trainer, if I do everything that I'm supposed to do, hey, I can make good money, my trainers can make good money, the club can make good money if it's all, through the right method. And then probably about, maybe 2008 or 9, I was kind of just exhausting all the avenues of continuing education within the company. And at that point in time, the guy that was the president, I don't know if he was the president of just the personal training department or the whole company at that point, because he had both positions at some point. He was a really good mentor for me, just one of these brilliant guys. He's one of these guys that I thought was 15 years older than me, but was only 5 years older than me because of the position he's in and how he carried himself, which, because when I first started managing when I was 24 or 25, I was well, I'm kind of hesitant about managing a bunch of 40, 45-year-olds. Some people have been training 15 or 20 years longer than me. And he kind of instilled in me that's, that doesn't really mean anything depending on, if you're qualified and how you carry yourself. But anyway, I was picking his brain to constantly learn more and develop and all that kind of stuff. And at some point in time, he was man, I'm busy. I can't just kind of be, working with you one-on-one all the time. You just kind of need to take your education somewhere else. And for whatever reason, I never really thought about, like, aside from just like the online certifications and all that stuff. And the guy was actually pretty good personal friends with Paul Quinn. So that's where I first started to do some continuing education, was through a lot of Paul Quinn stuff at that point in time. And so I did his PICP 1 and 2. I did his biosignature, then bioprint, then whatever you change it to, the last one. I took that 3 different times because that was a freaking awesome course. Anyone that's taken that understands that you need to take it 3 times to have some idea of, what the hell to do with it. And I took a couple of his one-off courses. Then I've done all of RTS stuff. So I've gone through RTS, like their 1, 2, 3. I'm still working through like their whole mastery program. That's by far always my top recommendation. If people say like who's my mentor, is Tom Purvis, the guy that developed that. I've been lucky that he's taught every single course that I've took through RTS. I say Paul Quinn I didn't really know personally very well. He was just like a terrifying coach, which was just awesome because I think like a good coach should be terrifying. And honestly, when you look at like someone like Paul Quinn and who he had worked with and what he did and like how much he'd just been like in the industry like balls deep for decades, like it's like a terrifying and respectable human being. And when you talk to him too, you're just like, oh, like the first time I looked like, listen to him lecture all day, I'm like, wow, I'm really dumb. And like, I'm always going to be dumb relative to what he had in his brain. But anyway, learned a lot of great stuff going through there. I've done RTS, did a little bit of MAT stuff. But like anyone that gets exposed to people that are like good therapists, like I literally went through that course, and like after the intro course, talking to the instructor, I was like, so I'd have to do this like full time for like 10 years just to be like not horrible at it. And he's like, yeah, pretty much. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to mess around with too much therapy stuff. I just got to be good at something. And I've done some FRC stuff, functional range conditioning stuff. I really like that course. I think that's about it. I've kind of done a couple one-off things here and there. But I'd say it always comes back to kind of like I said, I figured out real fast going through these courses, whereas like always I gravitated towards individuals, and then I gravitated towards what other coaches had to say and then like what athletes had to say. And it's like one of those things that, I wish I try and do a good job of actually listening to people that have been there, ahead of me. And that kind of clicked with me. I think when I was pretty young, which is one of the things that I think kind of helped me, not get stuck for a while, is like, some things you have to experience for yourself, but some of it's like the answers are there for us. Listen to someone that's doing things that you want to do or been where you want to go, that's been doing it for 10, 20 years longer than you have. And so that's literally like, that's people's time warp that they want to get better faster. It's like, we'll get around people that are been doing it 10, 20 years longer than you. So it always like the courses and all that stuff is great, but it's always like individual coaches and instructors and athletes that I kind of gravitate towards and ultimately take the most away from.
What I'm seeing here is more the pursuit. A lot of your pursuit follows much of how my pursuit was, just going through a different route, so to say. But my first year of college also was business oriented, so, and I can look back on those first years and say I'm very glad I was exposed, to basic accounting, because back then there was not software. You had to do it on index cards and all this other stuff. So, but just being exposed to accounting, marketing, finance, all these different components of business were great, because even though I moved on to exercise science and nutrition, I knew when I finally did get a business, there's more to it than just marketing. Yeah. Which I think a lot of people in today's world think that it's all about marketing, and they don't understand, expenses and reports and all the other kind of stuff. And as yourself, once I graduated, my route was I wanted to be a strength coach. And after one internship, I found out real quick, I don't want to do this. This is, I was an asshole. I was an ego asshole. I was stronger than, most other people. And I couldn't understand why these people were coaching people to be weaker, and the things that they were doing were, in my mind, ridiculous. And I couldn't see spending all my time doing that. But then it was like a mind fuck. Like, now what? Because, I was bouncing and I was making a lot of money bouncing, probably more money than I still make now. But I knew I couldn't do that my whole life. I didn't want to do that my whole life. And I moved to Columbus to train with, Westside and with Louie, and my wife's family's from here, so that was another reason to be able to come here. And then when I got here, I found a job working in a club. The same. Actually, my first job was working for Bally's, which they put me in sales. And man, I I went through the sales training. It was great sales training. I mean, it was great sales training. I will not take that away from them at all. 2 weeks of probably the best sales training I've ever had. You know, time commitment spouse. You know, here's your four objections.
Sure.
You know, I still remember that. And then they put me in the location as sales and started throwing phone books at me. It's like, start calling. I'm like, man, I can't do this shit. I want to fucking train people. I don't want to. And I sucked at sales because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then you're forced to close. And, you know, it's like, okay, if you can't do it, bring this person in to do it.
Yeah.
And after, I think 2 weeks, I talked myself into quitting. I mean, that's how good my manager was at sales.
Yeah.
He brought me in the office and just talked to me. And the next thing I know, I was walking out the door and I'm thinking, I think I just quit. And, but I did end up getting into more of a corporate type club for personal training, which was just straight personal training. I still had the sales, right?
Yeah.
I still had the personal training. I still had to sell the clients. I still had to do all that.
Yeah.
And, it was just not a hard sell.
Yeah.
It wasn't a sell off the street. It was selling people who were already members, which was it's a different beast. It's still a sale. It's still a different beast. Stayed there for 8 years and just got to a point where, you know, it just all gen pop. You know, you get an athlete here and there, but my break was I'd leave for 3 hours to train at Westside and come back.
Yeah.
So, you know, what a culture shock that is. I mean, you leave the dude that can barely bench 65 pounds, you know, for 10 and walk into a gym where monsters are benching 650 off 2 boards.
Yeah.
And then go back to people who pass out doing a lying leg press machine because the compression on the nerve was too much. But I learned, just as yourself, it got to a point where there was no path. It's like I'm here at 5 a.m, and I'm leaving at 10 at night every day except one day a week. And we just had my first child, and I'm like, I can't be this kind of dad. You know, I just can't do this. You know, what's the next logical step? And I can go through course after course, none of the courses that you had, but it was, you know, the ACSM courses, all the NSCA certifications and speed development courses, and same type of path, just, you know, continuing education. And then, you know, fell into kind of what I'm doing now. But I think the takeaway, and I see this with a lot of people that I meet that are in the industry and they're doing well, is the journey is kind of always the same. Yeah. You know, it's just a little bit different path where I think people look at what, like you said, they look at that cert that you have. And they're like, I need that cert to be like him. And it's like, no, you need to look back, you know, look at the whole road, look where it started, because everything you pick up around through that leads you to where you are. And a lot of the earlier stuff, at least for me in business, and especially in exercise science and stuff like that, it gives you a bullshit detector. You know, that a lot of people don't have. Like, you've been through it, so you can sit and listen to somebody speak for 5-10 minutes and immediately, you know, this is bullshit. I mean, and you wouldn't know that had you not had the formal education and everything you learned was from ebooks or, you know, some certification here or there, because what none of those teach you is the basic physiology of how the body works. You know, some of them like kind of make up their own super compensation cycle, like on the spot. And it's like, well, this is kind of like studied and, you know, it's kind of laid in ground. So that I think is really cool. The one thing I wanted to touch on is what is your clientele now? Like, what, that was the education and kind of like the past work history. But what is it now? Is it all online? Is it in person? Is it a mix?
Yeah, people that are, I guess I would say it's a little bit of a mix. I honestly, I hate online coaching with a passion. I had a point where, you know, when I first, because it's funny, like you said, people don't see everything that kind of happened before now, what everybody can see with kind of the social media stuff. And, you know, my big career jump, it's really funny. because I knew a little bit of your story, but it's funny kind of the parallels, because what happened is I met Ben Pekulski and became pretty good friends with him. And I trained with, I always say, like, my pillars of education. I look at stuff from Paul Quinn, stuff from Tom Purvis, and then the kind of, I look at stuff that I had brought to the table already, just being like a meathead, and Ben and I were just kind of in a similar thread where we just had this thing inherently within us where we like to hurt ourselves, like a lot of meatheads. It's not like that unique, but in the bodybuilding world and in the powerlifting world, like you just, you want to go something that you're inflicting suffering upon yourself. And so that was kind of our common ground. And I trained with him for a good 2 or so years before I worked with him. And just it was like there was a culmination of, okay, like I had some education, I had this experience, I had this thing that I had. And that's where I really kind of started to put a lot of the stuff together, as far as like, okay, like the joke is when I go to these certifications, they're like the nerd certifications, which I like. But like I used to go to a Paul Quinn course, and because Paul Quinn's a terrifying course, or a terrifying person, like he would look at all the students in there and he'd make fun of about 90% of them, because it's like 160 pound skinny fat guys. And he's like, this is like a strength course. Like, you're learning how to be strength coaches. Like, you guys are weak and look like shit. Like, how the hell is anyone going to buy your advice if you don't, like, in some way, shape, or form look the part? And Tom Purvis is the same way. Like, he'd be like, the last time I was at his course, he'd let people work out in his gym, and he sat down beginning of the course. He said, he's like, honestly, a lot of you probably shouldn't work out in my gym. And like, people are waiting for the punchline. He's like, it's embarrassing. And because you have all this information that's like the nerd stuff that you like. I like the nerd stuff. I like to sit around and talk about the nerd stuff. But like, it was one of these things when I was going through, probably one of the better compliments I've ever gotten from Tom. Obviously, people you like to get praise from. I went through his course, and I always just feel like an idiot in his course as well too, because it's his niche is like biomechanics. He's probably like the biomechanics person like on the planet. And like, when he's talking and we're going through like the actual coursework, I'm like, it's half of it's like a struggle, to be honest, to like constantly remember like, all the foundations for everything, because I don't use it on a daily basis. And kind of talking to him once at a course, he's like, well, he's like, I like doing stuff and working with you. He's like, because you actually like see it on the gym floor. He's like, I got, 95% of the kids in this course can remember every single thing in the book. And then they get on the gym floor and they don't actually, well, here's the application. Here's what that means in an exercise. So anyway, that was kind of, with Ben, and, I had all my nerd stuff. I had my own experience in coming with Ben, and, Ben knew Tom as well too. It was kind of where I put all that stuff together. Kind of what I think is kind of like my niche, which is like, it's hypertrophy. Like, I'm a meathead at heart. I had learned some nerd stuff along the way, and then how do I actually apply that with, working with people like Ben, in his prime, a 300-pound bodybuilder. There's different things when you're working with 300-pound bodybuilders than the rest of the world. So that was really, I was doing my job, and I was going back and forth often training with Ben. So I kind of had this glimpse of like, here's what I'm doing. And I had this thing always, when I was in my gym, like, I got to a point where I had my own clientele. I didn't require anything from the gym, like any feed from the gym. And I started just training. Like, my ideal client at that time was like the biggest client in the gym. Like, whoever the biggest guy in the gym is, the strongest guy in the gym, like, I wanted to work with that person. And so the funny thing, I get a lot of people now, a lot of trainers, they're like, oh, how do you get where you are, and how do you work with who you work with? And I'll be like, well, are you training the biggest guy in your gym right now, or the strongest guy in your gym? And like, which is kind of, maybe at first seems like a silly question, but they're like, well, people, they don't do that. They don't think about that. They just want to jump from whatever they're doing now. They like bodybuilding, and then they just want to work with pro bodybuilders. And I always ask too, why do you want to work with pro bodybuilders? Because if you think there's money in that, and directly there's not. Same as strength and conditioning world. It's just, it's not there.
No.
And but anyway, so I was like, look, that's the things that people didn't see, is like every gym I was ever at before I had any social media, like any trainer that ever knew me or worked with me that would validate this, is I always trained my clients were in better shape than the other trainers. And so there's a lot of things to overcome. It's like, well, how do you actually communicate with this person? Where I'd train people that were 50 pounds bigger than me, like still the same thing I get now is like, when I meet people in person, they're kind of like, oh, you're bigger than I thought. And it's like, well, half of my videos I'm standing next to Ben, or I was standing next to Dallas McCarver. I'm standing next to people that are the biggest human beings on earth. But there's things that come along with not just the skill set and the nuts and bolts of what you're actually doing that, take these guys' physiques further, hopefully, but just overcoming those objections that, anyone would see, like, well, how do you work with somebody that's 50 pounds bigger than you? So anyway, that was kind of the big thing, is I was back and forth with Ben a lot, and Ben started his gym, MI40. And this is the stuff that I like to tell people, because everybody has this vision of what everything is. And the worst business decision ever on paper is I left my super comfy job where I was just set. Like, I had a great gym, a great club, a great team. I had a great clientele. I could literally just kind of sit there and make as consistent money as you can make in personal training. And I left all of it and moved up to work for Ben before his gym was actually open, and kind of helped start the gym with him. And literally, I mean, I had zero income for 6 months, and literally, then I started as soon as we were legally allowed to have people in the building before the gym was open. I started to bring clients into the gym to start and train. So that's the thing people don't miss is, and at that point in time, I had a son, my first son, who was 1 year old. So on paper, I even remember talking to my dad, because I'm still horrible with finances. My dad's an accountant, and so he always would help me with my taxes and shit still, till I think this is like the first 2 years I've been almost a grown up on my own. But he was like, are you sure about this? Like literally like looking at my income from various years. And I was like, I think so. You know, I'm like, I got to do it. I got to make the jump, because it's just, I was at a dead end where I was comfortable, but it wasn't where I knew I kind of had this, I didn't know exactly where my vision of where to be was. I just knew that was the next step to go there. And, so anyway, people miss that. And then my population, that was the first time when I left where I was, honestly, maybe 40 or 50% of my population was like bodybuilders or competitors, and just kind of, you know, I made it that way. And then working at MI40, it was full-time, pretty much, bodybuilders and competitors. It's probably when I made that transition to that. And so I was basically there until, I don't even know when I left, maybe a year or so ago. And now I'm at the point, so I was full-time still training competitors up until maybe a year ago. And now I really just have one full-time client that I know there's going to have questions about, which is Dave Bautista. So I train him. And then honestly, the people I work with now are people that basically just come in town to train for one-off. So for one session, you know, or 2 or 3 days or a week or whatever it is.
Like a clinic type
thing.
And
when I get a lot of one-on-one stuff where it's like, you know, it's like mostly other coaches. It's like I'd say 90% of the other people. It's one of those things where, to be honest, I'm sure you could probably give me some good advice on this. I don't hear people talk about this a whole lot. The toughest balance I have now is like when I was working, I mean, I hear a lot of people say it, but my wife can vouch. I was kind of like you said, I was 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. every single day for about 8 years straight, had a client. And I stayed in the club and had clients where my wife would come in and train. And I'd usually try and leave with her about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And that was 5 days a week I was working those hours. And I'd work a couple hours on Saturday too. So I was working 70 hours a week for a long period of time. And then basically as soon as I had my oldest, now he's 5, but when he was born, I was like, man, I can't do this same type of thing. And I cut back to probably 50 to 60 hours when he was a year old. And even then, man, I was just like, I was missing so much stuff. I honestly, it was the most like internal conflict I'd had with like being like, you know, because before when you don't have kids, you're like, well, just work hard. And it's half of it's just like, literally, I'm in the building, I'm doing something productive. I know how to train. I know how to manage people and all that kind of stuff. And so then, and honestly, even now, is like this balance of like, you know, first and foremost, it's a shift. Like I can honestly say I want to be a good dad and a good husband first. And then I have all this struggle of like, okay, well, I still want to work with people. I still want to help people. I have some kind of a business going on. I got to manage and run that. So like that's, you know, my oldest son's 5. I got a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old. And honestly, balancing all of those things is like, it's a daily challenge where I feel like I want to be efficient everywhere that I am. And really keeping those priorities in order. And then, but the thing is, coming from like a coaching standpoint, you know, I'm always like, man, could I be helping more people? Could I be doing more stuff? Because I've cut back with how much one-on-one training I'm doing. You know, when I have people come in town, that's kind of why I've gone that route instead of having, because you know how it is. Like I'll get somebody that they train with me, they have these goals, we achieve those goals, and then they just want to keep training with me forever because it's better than training by themselves, which is nice. But if I have somebody coming in for 1 day, for 3 days, for 5 days, like I can impact that person and give them a bunch of tools where I could potentially impact, you know, their career going forward. So that's the balance with my time now, is really, like I said, kind of one full-time client, people coming in town, because I feel like it's where I can have the most impact. And then all the benefits of social media and the benefits of, you know, my big thing is I have like a content site, is it's information. You know, I think if I'm presenting it honestly, where it's like, okay, here's the information I'm giving for free, here's some information that I think has value behind it. And that's my whole thing as a coach, is like, it's managing expectation. You know, it's like someone pays for me one-on-one, it's going to be really expensive, but if you want access legitimately to my brain, you know, here's another option. And that's one of those things, obviously, where it's, I think everybody kind of knows that, but that was my whole thing. It literally stemmed from like, I don't want to miss my kids growing up. You know, what's kind of another option of what I can do, and that's kind of where that just stemmed from. Is I think it's a great. Because I want to be transparent. I want to be honest with what I kind of put out there. And like I said, of all the other stuff you could say about it, that's the beauty of social media. That's the beauty of the internet, is that's a different option for people that, you know, if you get to a point where people want to know what's in your brain. So
yeah, and it's how do I want to say this? It's an option that's a tool.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been in business for 21, 22 years. Tools change.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the mindset and the strategy that's going into that doesn't. Right.
Yeah.
So let's go back to, your journey and my journey, how it's kind of the same type of journey.
Yeah.
That journey was the same 20 years before me.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same journey 20 years later. Maybe
sure.
it will be college, maybe it won't be college. It's that becomes a whole nother conversation on is it worth, what the price has become for that. But the journey's still the same. And with social media at this point in time, it's just become a tool to be able to use as either marketing, revenue generation, customer service, or whatever people want to use for their marketing mix.
For sure.
I think that, to me, when people speak balance, and I used to talk about that and think about it in that term all the time, like, there's balance between this, and this. And a couple of years, I realized there is no such thing as balance.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Like, life isn't a balance beam where there's two things.
Yeah.
Right. That's pure balance, right? You start putting a third thing on there.
Yeah.
How you ever going to, you're asking yourself to do an impossible task, where what it comes down to essentially is time management, and time management and just being present. Like, so if it's with your family, just when you're with your family, and this is just generally being stated to everybody out there, are you really with them?
Yeah.
I mean, are you present? Because that makes the difference.
For sure, yeah.
If your wife knows that you're just sitting there, texting other people, you just spent 2 hours that you're supposed to be spending time with her, not being present, which really wasn't spending time with her, which is actually just going to make her more upset because you kind of wasted her time. And, the kids are the same way, where that when you look at it from, you can't balance the time, but you can, the presence, is huge. At the same time, you can't be working from home if you work from home and be focused on having to feed, the child every 2 hours.
Yeah.
If it's work time, it's got to be focused work from here to here.
Absolutely, yeah.
100% present. Because what happens that I see in almost every case is it's not focused and it's not present.
Yeah.
So they're doing one thing, and then the wife calls, they start talking to them for a half an hour. Then they, oh shit, I got to go do this. And then they run out and do this. And they finally come back and start the paperwork they were working on, get that done. And then by the end of the day, when you look at the actual outcome, of what was done, it could have been done in 3 hours.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, because the presence wasn't there.
Yeah.
Clients throw a different loop in the fire.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's time.
Yeah.
That's like a cutout period of time for an hour.
Yeah.
The one thing I can throw out as a suggestion that I did for years, and I can explain why I stopped doing it, but I did kind of what you were talking about, more mentoring type stuff. I think I called it a fellowship, or I tried to call it some other name other than what everybody else was calling it, just to make it unique in some sort. But I'd have coaches come in and I would work with them on their training philosophy, how to develop a training philosophy, because that, I feel, is the biggest lacking thing with any coach that's out there. Everybody learns the methods, principles, and they can go, but what's the overriding philosophy that's going on here? And most people that have been around can sit down and I can find it, just within a half hour, I can find it, especially coaches been around for a long time. Newer coaches, maybe not so much. They're still finding their way. They've still got a lot more to learn, before they can get there. But I can tell them, here's what you need to learn, to be able to get there. And this would take 8 to 10 hours, over 2 days. And I would charge for it. And to me, it all started because people would send me messages and say, hey, you mind if I stop out and pick your brain? Yeah. And then it ends up being a 6-hour conversation. And it's like, this is 6 hours of my time. Yeah. This is, I work. Yeah. And this, and then one of the other services was helping people set up gyms. They just don't have a clue. They have a dream, but they don't really understand that they're setting the gym up as a revenue source for clients, not something really cool for them to train in. unless it's a home gym. So it's like talking them off the edge, talking them what's necessary, what they really need, and kind of laying it all out.
Yeah.
And that again, because this becomes a business discussion, because most of the time what I found is they didn't even know what a P&L was. They didn't know shit.
Yeah.
So that one ended up running 2 days, like 2 6-hour days.
Yeah.
And this was all stuff I was doing for free.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, fine, just come out, stop and do it.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where, and it's going to sound bad, but it got to a point where I would spend time with people, and then 3 months later, I'd see they'd open the gym up using my competition as their resource.
Yeah.
And me sitting there thinking, okay, they had zero value,
Yeah.
in what I told them.
Yeah.
So my 12 hours meant zero.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even get a chance to bid it.
Yeah.
So like not even worth the bid.
Yeah.
And shit like this still happens. I'm sure it happens to you. The way that I deal with it, because I can't sit here and I'm not going to tell people that, you got to not, because my motto in life is live, learn, pass on. And I believe that 100%. So when I start feeling pissed off about stuff like this, I step back.
Yeah.
And I made the last seminar I did, I presented the example of, if I throw a medicine ball out into the universe, that doesn't mean somebody's going to be a rebounder and throw me that medicine ball back. And if I expect that, then I'm not throwing the medicine ball for the right reasons. I'm not trying to make the universe better. I'm not trying to make myself better. I mean, you help other people for you, not really for them. All right. But what people seem to forget is sometimes you throw the medicine ball back, but what you don't notice are the thousands of tennis balls that already came your way.
Yeah.
All right. So you spend a shitload of time with this one person, but I have an e-commerce company. So there could be 200,000 orders from people I've never met that come in over a period of a year that I never talked to one of them.
Yeah.
So I can't bitch about, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a give take type of thing. But I understand the frustration is what I put out there. But what this ultimately ended up leading to was it created a disservice to the people who did do business with us. Because now I would have a weekend taken, and then somebody would call and say, hey, you mind if I come out and pick your brain? And I look at their order history. I'm like, holy fuck, these guys spent $20,000, $30,000, and I got to tell them no because of this person here that hasn't spent a dime. And that's when I started charging. And then I would ramp the price. 'Cause at that point, I didn't even care how much I charged. I have to charge because it's a disservice to this other person. So I started at like $3,000. Somebody bought it. I went $4,000. Somebody bought it. Every time somebody bought it, I took it up $1,000. And it got to like $8,000 or something like that. I said, this is kind of, I can't even justify. I mean, it's getting to a point where I really can't even justify it. And then I had a tipping point where I have so many past customers and so many active customers that I don't have to sell it anymore. It's an aftermarket service that I provide. So it's become something that we as a company can provide that none of my competitors can provide. So that's a way to kind of think about it is you set it up like as a mentorship thing, and then you base it upon, the pay site revenue, different types of revenue that, because I think everything you get into has to have some type of end goal of some kind, with whatever it is. Otherwise it's just kind of like a hodgepodge, it's everything's a risk, right? Sometimes it's just a risk to see if it works. And if it works, okay, now we'll put more time and thought, into kind of going with that. But I do think that the future that I see, and I'm not in that online space for the same reason. I got a whole hour rant coming out about that here shortly for many reasons. And a lot of them is I think it's almost impossible to do a good job that if you're actually training people in person, a lot of your pivot points, a lot of your adjustments or regulations are based upon nonverbals or biomechanics, how they're moving. You're making adjustments. You can't do that on a piece of paper. What these people are doing is they're sending them programs. That's it. They're not coaches.
No.
They're not trainers either. They're just sending a program. Now when you got that person, in front of you, I mean, when they walk in the door, fuck, that strut's not right. They're not walking right. This isn't right. Their mood's not right. So in your mind, you don't even know you're doing it. It's just bing, 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 because you know what the outcome is.
Yeah.
You know the final outcome. You know how you got to get there, so you got to pivot that. I just don't know how anybody could do that online when. I don't know the percentages. I'm not going to look it up, but 80% is nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
You know, just tell people you're writing programs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the simple. And then what I challenged in the last video is then you better make sure that your program's better than like 531 or something that somebody can go pick up for $20.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, and you're charging $300 a month, you not only suck, but you're ripping off the industry.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we can go back and forth on this for a long. Actually, let me let you roll. What's one of the biggest things that bothers you with the online training community?
I mean, well, I like you kind of already said a lot of it, and I honestly think I get more than anything like the hypertrophy world, you know, the muscle building world is it's you know it's the same. There's so much information from so many different realms, and I honestly feel like if I've honed a skill from my training myself starting when I'm 15 all the way through a billion training partners to professionally doing it to working with some of the craziest, you know, from just a pure physique standpoint, from a work ethic standpoint, like my whole thing is like the summation is what I can get someone to do for one rep and then one set, you know, and really like that's my start with everybody is like, let's see and again, the hypertrophy world, obviously there's some arbitrary, if someone's walking in the door, you know, I might have, okay, here's the potential places we're starting based on this. Then as soon as we get them moving and see what they got going on, okay, well, check that one off. Okay, let's go here. And then from there, I honestly feel like this sounds, I'm not saying I'm the only person doing this, but it sounds, I don't know how to say it sounds, but I feel like what I'm talking about with one rep is different than what everyone else is talking about with one rep. So everything that comes after one rep is irrelevant. So again, everyone gets so, especially in the hypertrophy world, They look into programming so much as far as like, okay, well, how much this, how many reps, how many sets, how much time under tension, when do I pause, like how many working sets should I do, how much total volume should I do? And for me, it's like, you know, with all the people I've trained in person, like I never think about any of that. I literally just see what does this person have, what do they bring, you know, what can I start with a first session? And sometimes it's like I might spend an hour with somebody on one movement. We might have what I consider being 10 or 12 just kind of figuring stuff out sets. And that day I get one set out of them. Like if people kind of follow some of my stuff, I tend to lean towards kind of a higher intensity, lower volume program. And it's just because when I get one set out of someone, like that's my baseline. And obviously with rare exceptions, if you know there's a coordination component where I'm not going to take someone that has never squatted before in their life, obviously. So, you know, if that being said, that's my skill set, that's my favorite thing, that's my passion, that's what I try and be better at, try and be the best at that I can be. And then programming, like after that one rep, everything, anytime I would write something on paper, I'd be like, you know, I'd have that in the back of my mind every single time I'm writing this. And I'm like, I know how people are going to do this. I know one thing for sure. They're not going to do it the way that they would do it if I was with them. You know, so you try and go into these steps where then I got people sending me videos, and I joke too, is a nice thing. Like I attract the nerd population as some of my population because like, oh, I talk about mechanics and this and that, blah, blah. And so I get these people like sending me their stuff. And like every single time they'd send me a video, I'd be like, you know, take your nuts out of your purse. And they'd be like, what? They'd expect me to like say, oh, do this and pause and put your knee, you know, 4 degrees this way. And I'd be like, just take your nuts out of your purse, do some work. They'd send me a video. I'd be like, we're not working. I don't know what do you want me to do? There's not going to be any change occurring unless you work. And, you know, so it's you try and compensate. Can I do videos? Can I not? And then it's like, you know, someone's sending you a video after the fact where it's like in the moment, you know, that's half of why everybody trains harder with good training partners. I think I have a great work ethic. I still train better with someone that's got a similar work ethic that I do in the same scope of things. So I personally hated it. I honestly hated every moment. I had this thing, you know, my intake form. It had a bunch of stuff with the things you want to know about injury history and disclaimer and cover my ass, all that stuff. But then I'd have like several pages. I'd have to look it up out of curiosity of like trying to talk people out of working with me. Where I'd give them like a page of like everything I just told you. Like I don't know what you're doing for a rep. I don't know all this, and you're gonna get stuck on the semantics of do 3 sets or 4 sets. And so I'm like, if you're good with it and you still want to go after it, let's give this a go. And I being 100% honest, when I first started being like, okay, I'm gonna open the doors and do some online coaching, I had 100 email, like between DMs and emails, I had 100 people like wanting it. So I literally was, fuck, I'm going to go through fucking everybody. And I did it out of necessity. I did it where it was like, you know, I was in a stage of, I ran out of all my money. Then I basically had, you know, that's the fun part, people. And so I had a good 3 years of being just about out of money, just making it, just about out of money, just barely making it.
I think everybody needs to go through that though in this industry.
Oh,
They really should.
And the funny part is the thing is, you don't realize like how much I'm such a competitive person. Like when I first started to get in the industry, I honestly like wanted to charge the most rates and have the most full clientele and have a club that made the most money, just because that was the goal. I was going to win. And again, I always kept it. I was never a sales guy. I was like, okay, like I can be a really, really good trainer. I can have really good trainers. I can be really good at the skill of sales, because that's something that's in the way of doing that. And, so I was always like, that was my first motivation was first, okay, like I was making more money than I needed to make. And then when it was survival, I honestly, like, I don't stress in that environment. I didn't stress when I was just trying to constantly push numbers. I constantly had a quota to hit. Everyone knows in the big box industry, you have a quota every single month. As soon as you hit that, everyone's like, good job for 5 minutes. Now it's next month. And then when I was running out of money for 3 years straight, I didn't get stressed. Like, honestly, as soon as I kind of have like, am I here now where I can like make a living and like I might not have to work when I'm 80? And now that I'm there, I'm kind of like, there's discomfort being comfortable. But anyway, so I started online coaching purely out of necessity. I was out of money and I needed money. And so I'd have this whole disclaimer because I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel good about doing it. And then my whole thing was like, well, I've got 10 pages of transparency to these people. And people started working with me, and then I got full, and I was like, man, I hate this. So if I charge more, maybe I won't hate it as much. And I kept similar thing. I just kept charging more and charging more and charging more. And I was like, every time I'd buy it, people would buy it. It's like I realized, like, it's not like I'm not making my money's worth. Like, I hate doing this. I feel like if I get a certain price tag, I won't hate doing it, but that's not how it works, right? So like, I just was so miserable that I was like, all right, well, I just need to kind of find another avenue or another thing. And that's kind of where it came into like, I can give people my brain and I can give it to them for really cheap, and they can just kind of figure out what they do with it from there. And that's kind of the content site, in my opinion. It's like you literally just get, here's this, here's me talking about this, here's me showing this. My whole thing is I say the number one skill of any coach or trainer is managing expectations. As long as you honestly say what's going to happen and what the outcome is, then it's on the consumer after that point. And so that was kind of my transition through all of that online coaching. Is I hate it. I never felt like it wasn't my skill set. I was just not good at it. And I don't know who, if anyone is good at it. If my whole thing, my favorite thing, my passion is being on one-on-one. And so that's the whole thing. It stems into a good rant on everything in the entire industry then, where it's like, again, not to say that this is in and of itself bad, but you get the people that are the research people, which there's some brilliant things to take from that. But there's some people like really like split hairs about, well, so-and-so, I've literally had people like, well, so-and-so showed me that, after 23 reps in this muscle group, it's ineffective, so blah, blah. And I'm like, fuck. I mean, like, someone that would take time to write that to me, and I'm like, there's a billion examples of that, where it's like, we're just speaking a different language. And I try not to be like, I'm at a point now where it's like, with any nuts and bolts stuff, I take a deep breath. I avoid my knee-jerk asshole reaction. I joke that I'm a recovering asshole that still has constant relapses. Because some people, that's it. I shouldn't get mad about someone not speaking the same language that I speak. So I have a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but I could rant about anything that's, again, even programming within the bodybuilding world, the muscle building world. It's like, man, it's just not, people get caught up on stuff. And then it's like the stuff they get caught up on, I'm like, well, let's actually see these people, and let's actually see these people work and see them move. And it's like, all that's out the window. You're focused on the wrong stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like you said, I hate it. I hate online coaching. I haven't done it in, I don't know, a few years now, which is a beautiful thing for me.
Well, see, the thing that you also just said, kind of between the lines is, with your pay site that you have, and then let's just say the groups that the people that come in for the individual coaching. That online coaching was a disservice to those two entities. Yeah. Because now you're going into those two entities and you got to change your state. Yeah. And changing a mental state that fast is hard, right? Yeah. So now it takes you longer to change that mental state to do what you really want to do. Mm-hmm. So thus it leads to frustration that you're pissed off because you don't have balance in your life and all this other stuff. Yeah. So you get rid of, that, focus on those, and then you see that's, when you look at things, you got to look at things as being a service, like I said, as a service or a disservice. Yeah. People will look at sales and lost sales. Mm-hmm. I look service, I look to two different avenues. Yeah. Because there's always, with each choice, like that say the asshole that sends you a DM that's you got to scroll to be able to read it, and you're reading it, and it's just pissing you off, and then you respond, and then by the time you respond, you got 15 minutes into that. There could have been I answer all my DMs, so I'm rare according to that. But I don't deal with things like that because in that same 15 minutes, I could have answered 6 or 7 DMs from people who really want an answer.
Yeah, no doubt.
And what a disservice it is to them for me to spend time on some dude that doesn't really give a shit in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, or a troll or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at all that. It's just like, boom, you know. And I used to reply even to the assholes because I wanted to say I reply to everybody. Yeah. But anymore, it's just ignore and get rid of and, you know, go. Because it takes time to say, you know, I would write stupid things like, I apologize for my shortcomings. Yeah. You know, just things like that because it made me laugh. But it was, you know, put in there so it goes automatically, however that, you know, works with the whole, you know what I'm saying, copy paste type thing. Yeah. Auto reply is what it was. So I had auto replies for, you know, thank you for your message. Your comments have been noted. I apologize for my shortcomings. Yeah. Thank you. Thumbs up. Yeah. You know, all these different things. Yeah. You know, and usually they never said anything back because it just stopped. But then I go on, you know, to answer the other ones, you know, and sometimes there's, and you know this, sometimes there's questions that are so broad that there's just no way to answer. Yeah. You know, I just send them a link to an article that covers what they're talking about and they're ecstatic just because I replied. Yeah. You know, and there you go. You know, there's potential customer or at least somebody that you helped. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, it was a positive experience. Let's talk about the Dave. You know, I can't say his last name, Bautista, because there are questions here about him. Tell me about how you guys hooked up and how you trained him and what's going on with that.
So he's got another great trainer. I joke that I'm the all show no go trainer, and his other trainer is the all go no show trainer, where he teaches him. He's kind of his martial arts guy, I guess, for lack of a better word. So the guy was in the UFC for a while, and just his name's Josh, just a real good, nice human being, and you know, just the kind of guy that you'd expect. Like, I find that high-level fighters and anyone involved in that I kind of get along with really well, too. So anyway, long story short, he was friends with Ben, and he kind of asked at the time, can I bring Dave in to kind of train at your gym? So this is with Ben Pekulski at MI40. And so whenever they would just come in, I just was friendly with them. Like, I tried to be friendly with everybody. And so we just kind of got to the point where both of us were talking for a while, and he at one point in time just approached me and basically said, I watched the way that you train your legs. I watched the way that you train your clients' legs. And Dave, once you get to know him, he's a pure meathead, like for his background, just pure bodybuilding meathead. And in every way that you met, he's been in the gym consistently for, 35 years now probably. And so he always was obsessed, like every bodybuilder's obsessed with what they're worst at. So he's always obsessed with like having massive legs. But the funny thing is, he said, I've got this buddy of mine who's, I know from the gym, he's a meathead, and he never trains legs. So I'm going to buy him sessions for you to train his legs. So he's going to have to train them. So I'm like, fine, all right, let's do it.
That's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up, right? Yeah. So yeah. And then the funny part is, like, this is where, so then I'm like, Dave's like, oh, I'll just, can you give me your number and I'll just text you some information later. And so I'm talking to him. He's like, yo, I want to pay for the sessions. And he's like, yeah, I'll just send you my credit card info. And I'm like, all right. Which anytime anybody does that with me at first, I'm just like, man, it's like a lot of trust to me. But I'm like,
exactly.
Yeah. But then I'm like, well, I guess he could just murder me. Like, the funny thing about Dave is, like, he's a legit, terrifying human being. But anyway, so I trained his buddy for a while. I hadn't seen Dave in the gym in a couple months. And I would just text him every once in a while because he had kind of just had conversations with me about training legs and interested in training, all that kind of stuff. And so literally at one point in time, this is my the behind the scenes stuff where it's like I just being 100% honest, when I saw Dave coming in the gym the first time, like, it's not knowing him and not knowing anything about him as a person, like, you're just like, that's like my perfect client, because it's like a guy that's like, he's impressive as hell. He's like a lean 270 year round. But I would watch him train, and like, you could tell that he was in pain when he was training. And I was just looking at, like, he's been training the exact same way for 35 years. And he's had, aside from, anybody that knows anything about, I never watched the WWE, but I know what those guys go through. And it's just, I'd argue it's one of the hardest sports on the body of any sport. And so anyway, looking at him is like, for me, that's my ideal client, because he's just an impressive physique. I like working with just people that are just, impressive human beings, and he's just a straight up athlete. And then he's just broken. So it's like, I knew that I could get something out of his training that he hasn't probably had in a long time. So I just kind of like hit him up and try and be like appropriately, not annoyingly persistent, and every once in a while say, hey, what's going on? And I literally sent him a picture of the leg area one time. I was like, hey man, like, it's waiting for you. And so he hit me up. He's like, I want to come in. And so he comes in. We have a quick, casual, like, give me your list of injuries. What are we working around? And the funny thing is, like, like some general population will be like, well, I got a bruise here from this one time. I fell really hard. I don't know if we should be concerned about that. And for Dave, it was like he left off, like, as you're going through, he's like, oh, yeah, I had this surgery. I had that surgery. I mean, he's had biceps reattached, triceps reattached, knee surgery, spine surgeries, lats torn in half. I mean, there's tons of like.
He just told you what was hurting that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he gave me the list, and then as we're going along, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I had this." Like he would forget like surgeries that he had because he's just like that. And so we literally were going through a leg session, and the funny thing for me is like I'm doing my thing, and if I have a skill set, I mean I put more time and effort to like. I want to know where Dave's head at. I know what it's like to be a meathead and be in his long and try and really speak his language. And obviously there's the balance of he's been doing this consistently longer than I have, so there's a respect for, adherence. Consistency is not his issue. He's bigger than I am, so there's just the balance of like, well, what do I have to offer? And I always have this balance of me where it's like I think people anticipate, this whole like nerd session, and it's like there's a balance of like I got to show him something, legitimately what is the value that I bring to the table, but at the same time the guy's got to work. If we just went into a session and we did nothing, you'd be like, well, that was useless. I could just sit around and talk about nothing. So that's my, if there's a skill set, if there's something where like, I mean, the only person I talk about this honestly 100% candidly is my wife. Like I get excited and anxious leading into like a first session with someone like that. Like I feel like that's like my game day. Like I get pumped about that. And then like it's one of those things like it's like one of the only times I have anxiety leading up to the session, and then as soon as we start training, it's like I fucking like black out, and like I wake up an hour later. It's like I don't know if you ever saw like Old School. See Old School when Will Ferrell like rattles off that speech and then like wakes up. It's like what just happened? Like that's kind of my thing. So anyway, we're probably like 20-30 minutes through the session. He's like, are you available the whole rest of the week? And I'm like, yeah, I'm available the whole rest of the week. And just kind of hit it off from there, where it's like he told me really early on, like, man, this is the first time I've been training like completely pain-free for like 2 decades. And then some stuff that it's like I always like to hear, I'm putting my words in people's mouths, and I really try and take time now to hear, especially like a client, what they're saying back to me. And he's like, man, it's like the cliche things, it's like because of the way he's doing things and because of where he's at now, some things we're not handling the type of weight he used to handle. But he's like, man, this is so much harder than I used to train. He's like, the way I explain it to people is like, you just can't escape the pain. He's like, on any given thing, it's like, before it's even when he'd have, we squatting 400, 500 pounds on his back, I'd be like taking breaks and finding times to breathe and this and that, which is like, it's in and of itself a type of hard. But literally, if you're doing an exercise, I don't like to say time under tension because people bastardize that shit. But if you're working for 60 seconds straight and actually working, it's horrible.
Yes.
And so he liked that too, where it was like, one is the whole balance of things didn't hurt where they weren't supposed to hurt. He was feeling the type of pain that any type of meathead knows that they want to feel, is they want to / don't want to feel because they know they're doing what they need to do. And we just kind of hit it off from there. And then he's honestly like, he's just an awesome human being. Like I say that a relative of mine indirectly recently told me that they adopted a no asshole policy, which I kind of realized that like I've indirectly done that the past couple of years, where it's like I don't care who the person is. Like again, it's the value of your time. It's time spent. Like I definitely want to have a no asshole policy. And so it's one of those things too, where being 100% honest, was really excited just to work with Dave Bautista on paper and what I could observe.
Yeah.
But he's just like kind of like you'd imagine. I mean, he's a successful athlete, and the things that go along with that. He's just an awesome guy, and he's a very, very generous, like very like down to earth human being. So he's honestly as fun of a client as I get to train. He's still fun because I have to think a lot with programming. His programming changes a lot because it's one thing if you got a guy with just a wide open schedule, but it's like, all right, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks and then gone for this amount of time. I'm going to be here for a couple of days. I'm going to be whatever it is. Always having shit to work around, and he legitimately has like. There's never anything crazy for what he wants to do now, but some roles he wants to trim down a little bit for. Sometimes he wants to go up a little bit. And so anyway, he's awesome. And then what people ask me all the time, people get confused. I've said it so many times, but people still think so. I had a point where just from, professional differences left MI40 maybe a year and a half ago. And right after that, the funny thing is Dave had told me he was like planning on opening his own gym for himself anyway. He's like, oh, well, the timing works perfect. I'll just kind of hustle it up and pick it up. And so basically built a gym for his personal use and for me to train him there. So basically that's where I train out of. He lets me train, clients or anybody I want to have coming in from out of town. So I always tell people, man, like that's, if I'm ever like in a bad mood, I'm like, I'm living the dream, because so literally he like let me pick every single piece of equipment in there. Got a good bit of elite stuff in there. And so literally I picked every single piece of equipment. Basically there wasn't a budget, which half of the stuff I wanted, if it wasn't new, it was used, so find old used stuff. So at the end he was like, well, it's a lot cheaper than I thought it would be. I'm like, well, that's good. And so yeah, I'm living the dream. He's an awesome client to train. I got a place to train that I didn't have to pay for. He takes unbelievable care of me there. Just he built me an office. So talking about have space where it's like, that's the biggest lesson I've learned in the past 5 years is just being. I used to get up super early still, so I could be alone in my house to actually get some work done. And honestly, I can get more done in 2 hours now than I could in 8 hours the previous decade of my life. And so now just having a gym where it's nobody else in there, a little office to sit in at, and that's my schedule every day. I'd normally do 2 hours of work before I ever train or work with any clients to do anything. And then sometimes some extra on top of that, but it's literally like 2 hours, like hard focused work, and I'm getting a lot done. So yeah, it's awesome. It's living the dream. Well, I'm speaking of equipment. I don't even know. I'm trying to remember who the funny part with how long I've been using all elite stuff. I'm just going to talk about it because we're in here. So we have a good bit of stuff in his gym. But when I worked for a company I worked for a while was Crunch. And so when we were working with them, at that point in time, like areas like this, like even in your gym were not common, like turf, power X, and this and that. But like I could clearly, anyone could see like the writing on the wall, this is where gym's going. And so the owner of he owns all of them in Florida now. So he probably owns maybe, I don't know how many he has now, 15, 20 crunches or whatever. At that point in time, he had one open and was opening the other one. And so I was helping him build and develop the training department because he self-admitted didn't know anything about training. One of the best operators and human beings I've ever met. And so we had this expansion in this one building. I said, what you're going to put in here is you're going to put in turf, you're going to put in as many power racks as you can fit, and then just some of, for lack of a better word, more, kind of functional stuff. And so anyway, I convinced him to put elite stuff in there. And so literally when I was calling up, I'm trying to remember who I was talking to. He still works here. Matt, yeah. So this is probably maybe 2012 or something, 2011, 2012. So we weren't allowed to put any of this stuff in there through the franchise. And but I was just kind of pushing. He was trying to, like, the companies were supposed to go through, like, they could like build, these like the fucking rigs everybody has where it's like there's a little power rack on the side and like a jungle gym and shit. And so we're like getting quotes from these companies. I was literally just saying out of sheer principle, I was like, this is like a piece of shit rack that they're trying to charge you like a crazy amount of money to build, just so it's kind of like, because they don't make exactly what we're looking for. And so finally my owner's just like, F it, it's just easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So we literally put like 6 or 7 racks in that club and just a bunch of, I just made like this list. Yeah. It's a Crunch Fitness. So I joke, we got a chalk bowl. My owner's like, what is that? Like, we can't have a chalk bowl in here. I was like, it's fine. Like, members don't have to know what it's for, because Crunch is kind of foo-foo.
Holds a water bottle.
Yeah, exactly. It's for water bottles and towels and shit. And so the funny thing, I don't know, I think they've changed it since then, but I don't remember how many clubs we ended up putting elite stuff in.
That's great.
We had quite a few clubs from the beginning, yeah. So it was great because the owner was literally, the funny thing is he was building clubs in the 90s, and in the 90s it was all equipment. So first there was this balance of he was happy that he wasn't spending money on 30 pieces of selectorized equipment, which he would have done in a club in the past. Yeah. But at the same time, he's like, man, it's just this big open space. He literally would tell me, he's like, I'm terrified we're going to open and no one's going to go in there. And I was like, you wait, it's going to be the most crowded area of your gym. And lo and behold, it was the most crowded area of the gym, and that's how they modeled all of their gyms after that. So that got well off of the Dave topic, but I had to say it while I was thinking about the equipment we've got from him and then in through there. Because obviously your stuff's great, and but anyway.
The part I want to pick your brain about is my specialty, I guess, from a training standpoint, is working with, taking powerlifters from, gym rats, not gym rats, maybe a little bit higher than that. Yeah. But to elite pro totals, and then making them better. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what Westside was all about when I went there was, your role here is as a lifter, to get your name on the board. That's the number one reason why you're here. If you can't do that, leave, and make your training partner stronger than you are. Yeah. Then when he gets stronger than you, it's his job to make you stronger and vice versa. And that was the 14 years I was there. And then when I left, and started, Elite FTS, that's when I stepped away from Gen Pop. And there are some things I do miss about Gen Pop. I'm not going to bullshit or lie about that, but there's very few things I miss about it.
Yeah.
You know, I love the challenge of taking somebody who is either at or so close to their genetic potential that you have to find a way to get it. I mean, in powerlifting, it's okay. We got these 3 lifts.
Yeah.
All right. Just if I add your 3 best lifts together and put them together, that's higher than your total. So how do we get those 3 in the same day, you know, to happen? That's one thing.
Yeah.
And then how do we find the weak points that are keeping the other lifts back? And then how do we make them better? And then, you know, over a period. And I try to find people that I can build multi-year templates. I'm not going to say a plan because it would be impossible to write a plan for multi-year, but I can lay out a 2-year template. If I want to be a pro lifter on this day and they're an average lifter now, you give me 5 meets, you know, 2.5 years, I'll make you a pro lifter. But you got to be here.
Yeah.
I got to see you. You got to do what I got to say. But then once they get to that top, that's where I like it the best because from there, like a 5-pound PR from one meet to a next meet is fucking substantial, and it's not easy to do. I mean, it's like a lot of focus, paying attention. And when John would come out and I was kind of helping John, you know, it's a lot of it was the nonverbal stuff that I was talking about, and, you know, looking at the skin thickness of his lower back because that was his tell all the time. You know, seeing if he was actually flat or not flat. Changing, you know, programs based and much of this he would do. I'm just making the observations. But even him at his level to be able to make the changes that he had to make in his lats, for instance, you know, without his legs suffering. Because volume goes up here, it's, you know, it's got to balance out.
Yeah, it's coming from somewhere.
The challenge of that is just intriguing as fuck to me. And with powerlifting, we have the training, and the other aspect is the recovery from the training because it is heavier intensity,
for sure,
you know, wise. Volume, not so much, but intensity is what beats them down. You, on the other hand, are dealing with physiques. All right, so you're dealing with the nutritional aspect, you're dealing with the training aspect, you're dealing with, you know, the mental aspect as well. And I don't even know how to ask the question, but when you're dealing with the pro bodybuilder that didn't just turn pro, you know, been pro a couple years, already, I call it the 20-pound pro growth spurt. So they already hit the 20-pound, you know, everybody turns pro, they put 20 pounds on the first couple. Already past that, right? Now you got them. Now you got to make them better. You know, what are the things that, the indicators that you look for? Like if you had a physical assessment, more or less, that you could say, okay, I need to know this about this guy when he walks in. What are your tells to be able to see what the potential's always there? I believe. I totally believe the potential's always there. The will to work has to be
for
there.
Sure.
Or they have to just have crazy fucking genetics. But even that runs out after a while.
For sure.
You know, so what are the things, I guess the question would be, what are the passions that you find? You can see I fired up just talking about this with the lifters. What are the passions that you find with those clientele? Because it tests, like Dave even is a good example because he's testing every skill set you have. You know, not just from the training and the diet, but now he wants to gain weight. Now he wants to lose weight. You know, there's curveballs. So from the bodybuilder standpoint, what would be the things there that get you fired up? That
it's a good question, man. It's a big question.
I know, because it's different all the time.
For sure.
You know.
So kind of some of the big stuff. I mean, it's I honestly feel like, I know for a fact this is dealt with every sport, but so I will say some of it's hard and some of it's actually easy because of some of the things we deal with, where I just feel like in the bodybuilding world, and maybe it's just me because this is my world, but I deal with so much arbitrary I have to shit because that's what we've always done shit. So one of the biggest things is when I can just actually sit and have a conversation. It's the same with everybody. It's like, you know, really having, what are your actions built on? Like, what are your principles? Like, okay, this is the exercise you have to do for this body part. Okay, let's talk about why you feel like you have to do that. And like, honestly, like that's the nice part when I'm like, that's my whole thing. I attempt I attempt to, because there's all this shit I have to deal with in the bodybuilding world. There's so many camps and coaches and gurus. Honestly, like, I'm full disclosure, I'm completely detached now from any of the nutrition, any of the supplementation. I was doing that. There were people that I was working with in person would be the only people where I do the nutrition and their training. And to be honest, like, I love that. Like, when I'm absolutely doing everything, there's honestly a component of bodybuilding where, again, full transparency, the drugs are over my head. Like, I want to say where I'm like, I feel like I have to be an MD or a PhD to really do a good job at that. So it's one of those things where I'm like, honestly, I don't want to bother with it. And it's the same thing I talked about. I put it in the same category as trying to be a good therapist. It's like, well, I'd have to go back to med school for this. I'd have to then practice it like with this clientele for 10 years to be okay at it. So I've kind of put all my eggs in the basket just with training. And the way that I always like approach it with anybody is like, let's talk first, obviously from their feedback, most important, because again, that kind of talking about the nature of people that you kind of learn in sales and you learn with people is people don't believe anything you tell them. They only believe what they tell themselves. And so that's really with anybody. It's just like, that's the big thing, especially with bodybuilders, is like, let's just walk down the road of, what's important to you, what do you want to change, and then what's your thought process and principles behind what are the actions you're actually doing. And I always just leave it with people now is like, I don't want to technically, I have a couple of very good friends and bodybuilders that because I've worked with them so much in person that I'll write programming for and train with when they're in town and stuff like that. But aside from that, like everybody, I just say, let's just see what helps, and we'll just, even if sometimes I'll have somebody in town as simple as like, let's just go through this body part. That's most of the time the simplest place I can kind of just get right into overcoming potential objections or working around the psychology of, well, what's your worst body part? Because they'll know it. And that's the first opportunity where, okay, we can apply some principles and see how this might go. And I always just say, like, look, like, I don't care if you think some of this is dumb or if you find it useless or whatever it is. Like, I mean, communicate with me because I'd like to know. But then too, if something doesn't work or you think you don't see the place or whatever, like, just trash it. That's fine. Like, I'm not married or attached to any of this, because it's the same thing as like, I mean, people really, what I just said, people are like, oh yeah, I know that, but they don't really know that. They're like, if you can't get a buy-in from a client, like, nothing else matters. Absolutely nothing else matters. It doesn't matter if I could take someone's current actions and I could draw on a board and prove, for lack of a better word, mechanically, this makes no sense. This is vastly superior based on all these principles. If the person's not bought into it and going to do it, 3 times a week for the next 10 years of their life, well, then it doesn't really matter, does it? So some of it's just kind of hopefully talking with guys and breaking some of the paradigm of like, I have to do this movement. Okay, well, let's look at this movement. What kind of actual results have you seen from this movement? What things have you seen from this movement that you don't want to see? And for me, it's a lot of stuff where it's like, for me, a huge thing is if I can get somebody training pain-free. That might be the end of my interaction with somebody, where if it's like they feel like they have to do these movements, but when they actually walk down the path, they walk down the path of saying, oh, these movements wrecked my elbows, and now either I do them through pain or I just don't do this body part at all. So some of it's working through that. I mean, that's probably one of the first places I start. Like, I kind of have, my principles, which are just kind of pieced together from other stuff that I build any exercise selection around, is just, profiles, which is basically just the resistance profile of an exercise. Bracing, which is to an extent some of it's how much other stuff you have to manage, but then also really in bodybuilding is like how much do you have something to push in direct opposition of the force. And then the last thing is alignment. And so I kind of look at all three of those things with their exercise selection if I'm just going to have a place to start. And I'll get glaring shit. I'll get guys that do straight bar curls where, again, if you can see on video, it's like you got guys that their elbows stick out like this. They're using a weight that only goes up and down, and they got their elbow joint 45 degrees out of plane. And it's like, let's just take a look at that. And if you have some understanding of, overuse of a hinge joint and force going through it, can we maybe see that doesn't make a whole lot of sense? And then it's the thing where people like, again, I always say too, is like, I know the barbell is hardcore, but is like a dumbbell really less hardcore? Like, if a guy can curl an 80-pound dumbbell strict, is he going to have huge biceps? Okay, let's just find that option and make it work. So some of it's little stuff like breaking guys literally knowing, just not connecting the dots of doing stuff that's wrecking their body. And as soon as you start doing something that's not wrecking their body, 2 things happen. Obviously, at least they're not going to keep regressing those joints. And then whenever you're not regressing a joint, force that's going through an elbow at like this angle, if you put it through at the right angle, it's going somewhere else more. So biceps are like, holy shit, I feel my bicep again. It's like, I joke and I deal with the same shit. The things people don't, like, they'll see me doing this fucking tedious exercise for a bunch of reasons. I'll give triceps as an example. once you understand stuff lining up, triceps are huge fucking pain in the ass, especially for isolated work. So I'll do this thing that's stupid and tedious, and people are like, oh, there's Joe, he likes doing stupid and tedious shit. Like, no, like, I fucking dragged my feet for 10 minutes setting this up. It's a pain in the ass. I'd rather just do fucking skull crushers. But it's because I personally wrecked my elbows doing skull crushers for 10 years that I know that I can't fit with skull crushers. So I again, for the direction I'll often take in the bodybuilding world that just works the easiest and is kind of the gateway into let's maybe look at the rest of it is let's start with your weak body part. Let's kind of look through some of your exercises from there. And lots of times I'll start with exercise. Like I'll just say, what's your normal workout? Like, let's just go through that. I'm not going to throw all this new shit at you right away. And if I really see something that's like, again, for lack of a better word, on paper, just, a completely different place that I would want to start, I'd see if they're open to the idea of something else. And then if we go into that, we go into those things. And then within those principles, that's the whole thing is I'm trying to get the rep the way that I want it to look. And basically the simple thing from bodybuilding is, again, I hate the time under tension shit because people are like, now I'm training for time under tension. And I'm like, well, what were you doing on the other exercise? Like, and I'm like, let's just time under tension. Again, it's something that nerds thought sounded cool. And then they start to use it. And then you get the meathead that wants to talk down to the other meatheads and he learns time under tension. So he throws time under tension in their face. Like, well, why'd you pause at the top of a squat? And I'm like, so it's like, I hate to say time under tension. So let's just say like using or not using your muscles, So if you're going to choose to do an exercise for 6 reps, let's use our muscles the whole time we're doing that exercise, or do 5 reps for whatever, if you can't actually do 6 when you're doing it. So anyway, I try and get a rep looking the way that I want to look at. It's lined up the way that I want to look at. And I guess that kind of starts where it stems into the whole other component, which is effort. And even with some of the strongest, craziest guys in the world, like, if you get people to actually use their muscles the whole time they're training, like I've seen a lot of grown men crumble, and that was half the fun when I was training with Ben a lot. I was always a competitive person, but Ben was really the person that kind of instilled me a lot. When we had someone, people would come, they'd come and train with us sometimes, especially when Ben was at his peak, and I was just trying not to die because it was only 1 or 2 sessions a week for me. Is like the level of intensity and volume, like I still like to think that I can bring a high level intensity, but I don't train remotely with the volume we did for certain years that we were training. And so we'd have people come and kind of just unspoken, like we're going to put it on them nicely because some people need that. Like that's a learning thing that they can take with them. And man, just seeing people when they just use their muscles, they crumble. And and so that's kind of where I start, and it's different for everybody. And I say that sounds kind of bad, but it's not really. I mean, some of my favorite training partners and favorite pros and favorite athletes I've worked with is because they like that. I mean, they thrive in that environment. So it's not like you're necessarily trying to bully someone, which it could sound like to somebody listening. It's just like you're around these competitive people that want to be better. And then when they find out there's another gear of better, a lot of people are excited. They'll sit down after the workout and be like, holy shit, I sucked. I got my ass kicked and I vomited 6 times. But it's like I got another gear, I can take it. And so there's all the on paper stuff, which is probably one of the place that I kind of always start because I'm going to have somebody do. We got to pick something. Everybody. It's the same in anything. You could have 10 brilliant coaches write 10 different programs that are 10 different ways. It's not like one's better than the other. Like, fuck, let's just pick some. I got to pick somewhere to start. We could have a philosophical conversation about why I started there later, but let's just get something done in the gym, and then it all comes down to effort. So teaching people what I think real effort looks like. And the component is what can I get out of rep? What can I get out of a set? And then I love in the bodybuilding world to push the intensity variable as far as I can, meaning how far can we take a set? So before I start to push volume, it's literally like how far can you appropriately take a set and or extend a set? And because I've seen, that's the bodybuilding world where it's like, why the hell do we want to talk about volume? Where it's like I heard this term the other day, which I can't believe I've even heard it before, but called it like the 3 sets of 10 crew. Which I was like, fuck, that is everyone knows who that crew is. Like, it's the 3 sets of 10 crew. And so people, those 3 sets of 10 crew, they might do 15 sets of, they'll say, I did 15 sets in the gym today. And what is it going to be? It's going to be 15 sets of 70%, like when they perceive pain and then it's done. Or maybe they're going to be doing some sort of their own modified hit where it's 2 sets, they're kind of sandbagging, and then they go hard on one. Or they go hard on their first one, and then they're just, submaximal the next sets after that or whatever. So for all those reasons, talking volume and stuff, it's like that's the last thing down the road for me, in the bodybuilding world, is what volume does someone actually need to take themselves to that next level. That's the next requirement of stimulus that they need. And then another big thing, the only thing I say in the programming world in bodybuilding that's just completely, it's not, I want to say that there's a bunch of coaches that sounds silly to say capitalize on it, but the bro split is so prevalent still of one body part, a day, which again, you could maybe make the argument that someone at some point of a certain amount of size needs a whole day for their delt, maybe. But it just seems obvious to me that frequency is this thing where sometimes it's as simple as that. Like I've had a couple of my favorite athletes when I've had total control over everything they're doing. Like I've done it with female athletes when I've had natural female athletes and people are like, she's got to be on roids. Because how much she changed in 4 months, and that's not possible. And I'm like, it sounds like a dick or egotistical thing, but if I actually have control over all those variables, I get this level of effort. Like they're going to have better exercise selection with more tension going where they've ever had it before. They're going to take each set that they're taking as far as they possibly can. They're going to be training things at possibly twice the frequency they had before. Sometimes it's the perfect storm of you get these gains out of people that they didn't think they still had in them at that point in time. And then recovery is just the biggest thing, obviously, after that. And that's another reason I like to I start with kind of a higher intensity training, because I'd rather have it high intensity with a session, get more volume with frequency, and then from there really see if someone needs more. And honestly, from people that I've seen, I always use the example of Ben. Like Ben's probably the only person, Ben Pekolsky, that like maybe needs a little bit more actual volume. Especially when he's in his prime and competing, like where he could actually do like a set that was like crazy intensity, doing 7 or 8 plates on a hack or something and taking it 2 reps past failure or someone would normally die, and then he'd be recovered in 60 seconds and be like, oh, maybe you actually need a little bit more stimulus. But most people that I've seen just aren't in that category. So hopefully that answers pretty well. And and like you said, like when you work with anybody, it goes a whole bunch of different directions. It could be a whole bunch of different things. And then sometimes I get people that they're pre-contest or something. I'm like, well, what was your workout plan today? Let's not deviate from hardly anything. Mm-hmm. Let's just make sure first and foremost, like, what is your definition of a good session? Because I just don't want you, if nothing else, even if I felt it was a great session, but they left in a bad mood, that's going to put more of a damper on their prep or their competition that's coming up in 6 weeks than whatever I could have done to their body. So stuff like that. There's one-offs too, where it's like, okay, well, what do you want to get out of today? Let's make sure that we check that box first and foremost. And then if I can just sprinkle in a little something that maybe you take from the session, fantastic, But
the going back to the time under tension is that's something that kind of drives me nuts too. But it drives me nuts kind of like the volume sometimes drives me nuts too, because you don't know how the person's defining that. Mm-hmm. Like to me, volume is sets times reps,
mm-hmm.
And that's the basic calculation for volume. Times weight, that's workload.
Yeah.
But to some people, volume is workload.
Yeah.
They don't even know what workload is. So I'll have a whole conversation, not have a fucking clue what they're talking about until they say something. It's like, oh shit, that's not even that.
Yeah.
But then when you factor in, in my world, intensity is percentage of 1 rep max, and bodybuilding, it's effort.
Yeah.
But when you factor in volume with effort, you're talking a whole different story now.
Yeah.
So what kind of effort? Mm-hmm. And I think you touched on that.
Yeah.
A moderate effort's completely different than a high effort. If you're talking on a high volume. If you're high volume, high effort, you're fucking shot. You better be.
Yep.
I mean, you may not even finish. Mm-hmm. But time under tension is another one of those things that's never really been defined well in my mind.
Yeah.
Where I had a conversation with a trainer a couple years ago where I showed him a video of a max effort squat that I did. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, your time under tension is about 3 seconds. I said, I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Look at when I get under the bar.
Yeah.
As soon as my feet hit the floor and my back gets against the yoke pad, my hip flexors are flexed as hard as they possibly can. My glutes are flexed as hard as they can.
Yep.
I'm braced as hard as I am wedging my body between the bar as hard as I can in a static isometric contraction before that bar even breaks. Mm-hmm. Then when I lift it out, I'm holding it for 2 or 3 seconds to let the weight stabilize, through my body into the floor. Mm-hmm. Then sitting down, standing back up, timed it total 14 seconds.
Yeah.
So how's it being defined?
Yeah.
Because now, granted, I could have just stood up and held it loose.
Yeah.
It becomes, I hate terms like that unless you're 100% on the same page with who you're discussing it with, because the variance is so huge that it actually changes the entire narrative of the conversation.
For sure. Yeah.
2 seconds compared to 14 under extreme tension,
Mm-hmm.
most of it being static.
Yeah.
And where all they're seeing is concentric.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, fuck, dude, you got to
Yeah.
absorb force too. You got to absorb it and so forth.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that a lot of those things kind of parallel over into bodybuilding. The one thing I was going to say with when Meadows was coming out and training on Saturdays all the time, he'd bring a lot of these guys out, a lot of pros. And the one thing that I noticed, and the real cool thing about pro bodybuilders that is intriguing to me, is you can see shit flex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, somebody who's 15, 18%, 20% body fat.
Yeah.
If they're doing a chest supported row, I got to look really hard
Yeah.
or actually put my hands on them to tell what the fuck is moving.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys have come out like John at his peak. I mean, the shit's so fucking grainy. I'm seeing the fibers actually moving, you know. And the one thing I remember is the back was always an issue for almost everybody that came out. They do a chest supported row. It's like, dude, you understand you're just using your traps or just your rear delts. Like, get your scoot up, get this shit on your lats. And I go, oh my God, I've never felt that before. I'm like, well, this is why your fucking rear delts are the size of somebody's fucking bicep. I mean, like ridiculous. And this is why your lats suck. Like but I don't know how. I mean, they're not going to see it, and obviously they don't know what you would think that they know what to feel. But all they feel is the back pump. And so it really started making me think that, how many of these guys really understand, a lat pump compared to a rear delt pump compared to a trap pump. Or sometimes the pump doesn't even matter. It's just having somebody watch. If you're doing, say, a straight arm cable pull down, that should be all lats. And you should see the lats flex, and the erectors really shouldn't be doing shit, but yet the erectors are, I would see this all the time. Then you make these adjustments and they're like, wow. And the pecs are kind of easy. I mean, you can see if they're doing what they're supposed. The triceps are a motherfucker. You're right on that one. The triceps are a motherfucker because you see them. I mean, it's just the whole thing. It's really, especially when their arms are that damn big. That was one that's like, John, I don't know, man. You figure it out. I know how to make fucking triceps strong. But I mean, you're dealing with restricted range of motion just about on everything that they do. Biceps kind of the same way. But legs are a little bit easier because you just beat the fuck out of them and hope that it goes from there. But have you seen the same type of things?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's from I mean, you kind of nailed a lot of the body parts. I mean, you look at to some degree, everything around the shoulder joint gets more complex. Again, as compared to, how much stuff can extend your knee, right? Compared to a quad. And like you said, even just the semantics of some of the things, like people don't think about the semantics. Like that's the stuff with like again, using triceps as an example. It's like just trying to make stuff line up. For whatever reason, the semantics of a lot of leg stuff just lines up easier. So it's easier, like it's once you set up with someone with a squat or any squat or leg press variation, there's not a human being on the earth that can't, between one or two exercises, take their quad or take their hips through a full range of motion. The only thing you really have to worry about maybe in the bodybuilding world is restricting range, where it's like, okay, at some point in time, obviously they run out of range and you get this pelvis shift and the spine shift or whatever it is. But that's about it. It's like, okay, here's your range. Now, like you said, let's just run your ass into the ground. Whereas stuff with like, obviously you said like how many muscles can actually, extend your upper arm. I mean, you got rear delt, you got rotator cuff muscles can obviously do it. How much stuff can just move your scapula? Obviously, like you said, with traps, and then compounded with you can't see it, which obviously there's a big component to that. So yeah, that's half of it is, and that's where this is the tough stuff, obviously, right? Where it's you make peace with the content you put out, because the reality is every single piece of information you ever put out at some point in time, not only is it not benefiting someone, it's actually hurting someone. Someone's going to read something and see something and be like, oh, cool, like, and then take it out of context. I get that stuff all the time. My most common thing I have a very good friend that I got to train with a couple of times, just at Arnold, is Luke Sandow, is a IFBB pro. And so the funny thing is I'm very good friends with, he's also good friends with Jordan Peters, who's a very prominent coach in the UK. And so he was telling me he thinks it's hilarious observationally looking at our two groups of people, and I'm very good friends with Jordan. He says all of my people are like, I attract the nerd people, and they watch what I do, and they just attach to the nerd stuff, and then they don't train hard. They're like, oh, well, you just got to squeeze and do this kind of shit, blah, blah, and that's it. And he's like, if you just are a normal person looking back, he's like, they're missing the 600-pound deadlifts and the front squat, whatever. They're just somehow not looking at that part because they don't like that part. He said, then the funny thing with Jordan's part is he gets all the giant gorilla meatheads, and they just want to pick up heavy shit regardless of, it's not going anywhere it's supposed to go. They'll keep doing this exercise over and over and over and over, and just, accumulate injuries or accumulate pain and just trying to put more weight on the bar. So that's the thing. Whenever I'm putting content out, I might have something for me that's a tool. And that's one of my, if I try and put more time and effort, honestly, more than what I'm putting out, is trying to context what I'm putting out, saying, so here's this tool. Like, again, if I have somebody that can't feel their lats, that's where I'll if I have stuff that looks fucking fancy or cool or whatever it is, it's a specific tool to let's find that thing. Let's find the lat. Because there's literally, like you said, I've seen guys that can, 4-plate barbell row, and they do it, and they have a teres that's this fucking big and a rear delt this big and biceps and traps that are huge, and literally just like this little string of a thing that's a lat hanging along for the ride. And so it's like, I understand that like people have this idea that we have to do these hardcore things and we have to do that. But it's like, I might have to do this stupid, tedious tool to teach someone how to use and actually find that muscle. And then maybe eventually down the road, we can do some manly shit and redirect some load to that place once we found it. And so that's the thing, is like, because people will look at Ronnie Coleman's, they look at whoever these people are. And it's like, when you understand, muscle bellies and insertions and the mechanical advantage that can give with someone like Ronnie Coleman, kudos to him. You take away nothing from him, because all those exercises he used for his lats, that tension just went right where it was supposed to. So you watch him barbell row, you watch him pull down, you watch him T-bar row. And so people say, well, that's what you have to do to build massive lats. And it's like, to me, it's like the most common sense, where it's like, well, the only proof we have from that is that's what Ronnie Coleman had to do to build massive lats. And there's times when structure and muscle bellies and the way something crosses over a joint just put someone at a huge advantage for something to work, and someone at a big disadvantage for something to not work. Because it's the obvious thing. It's like, again, I'll say John because I'm friends with him too, and I won't pick on him, but obviously Ronnie Coleman's back compared to John's. Is it because John didn't work as hard or isn't as smart as Ronnie Coleman? I mean, I think it's the most normal human beings will answer no. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, if it's the cliche thing, if John's going to take himself to puking and vomiting and shitting his pants on a hack squat, he could tell me he just doesn't want to work hard enough training his lats or something like that. Or if he's smart enough to figure out the stuff that he can, he's not smart enough to figure out his lats. There's things that generally put people structure that make it a big challenge. So, and that's the big thing is sometimes you got to find different tools and different solutions, and the bodybuilding world hates to get out of that realm. They always go through that thing. And my favorite example, still for a million reasons, as I get older and older, one of my favorite bodybuilders ever was Dorian Yates, because people like to misuse him as an example of being hardcore. And I was like, if you read what he wrote and what he said, he's the first guy to say, I read everything that I could possibly read. I looked the way that everybody was training. And if you looked at the exercises guys used prior to him and the exercises he used, he did so much stuff that you weren't supposed to do at that point in time. Like, the guy didn't squat. He didn't do a barbell squat. He did no free weight exercises for his quads. It was all hacks and leg press and leg extension. And like, you get guys this day that say like, oh, you have to do this because Dorian was hardcore. And like, Dorian was the king of using his brain and doing stuff that was hardcore that just wasn't the traditional stuff, And so anyway, it's one of those things like that's, I feel like, just a massive challenge sometimes. Like I said, the one-on-one conversations are always the best. It's because you just kind of like walking people down this path where, again, you might at some point in time have to use this untraditional tool to find this body part or to find this muscle, and then maybe work into the traditional tools to some capacity after that, So yeah, it's that's it, man. Because I mean, you see it with every bodybuilder. Everybody's got their stuff they're great at. Everybody's got their lagging body parts. And if some people don't figure it out, you just see over the progression of somebody competing for 10 years, they might grow 30 pounds, but they go from 30 pounds lighter imbalance to 30 pound heaviers with the same imbalance still, so it's tough to get people sometimes out of those paradigms to actually make some big change to make body parts progress and change,
Yeah, I heard you earlier say that you were a recovering asshole. Let's go into that a little bit. Tell me something about that. Why would you say that you were an asshole? Was it prep? Was it dieting? Was it putting bodybuilding as first priority?
No, I think it was just So sometimes there were times when honestly, the only prep where I was really an asshole was my first prep, because I didn't know what I was getting into. And in retrospect, the funny part, I suffered the least in that prep of any of them, but literally it's because it was my first. No, I think I was more, what I refer to that as being guilty of, being ego driven. And as soon as I have had some knowledge or have some knowledge, and I would get somebody like, just kind of like you said, to be the trolls or be whatever, or be someone. My natural response to an asshole is to respond as an asshole, and it's one of those, such a cliche thing, and I kind of, you first hear it, it's true, but as you just keep existing and interacting with more people, like I just realized, like, that any negativity that I'm producing, one, isn't helping anyone else ever, and it's not helping me, at all either. That's the bigger part, and you realize how much is like. There's still the kind of times where I guess I allow myself slight relapses of being an asshole. Is I really, if anybody reads my stuff, I put a ton of time and effort. Like I joke that it's nice that people think of me as an expert, but I just frame the ends of my knowledge better than most people do. Like I don't know shit about a ton of shit. Like I'll be the first guy to the closest thing I have is when we're putting stuff, getting force into the body. What happens after that? People will ask me questions about, different types of hypertrophy and chemical responses and what happens. I'm like, fuck, I don't know. And I might have read some of it one time. I might have tried to memorize it, but it's not interesting to me and I don't want to be that concerned about it, So I spend a lot of time framing things that I write, which the funny thing is if you're not an asshole and you don't try and make everybody think that you know everything and try and sound really, really smart, then you don't ever get caught. You know what I mean? Where it's like, that's my thing. If I seem like an expert, is I do this weird thing that I don't ever talk about stuff that I don't know. Mm-hmm. So if I write something, I'm very careful about writing it. It's the only time I allow myself to be an asshole. They'll read something, emotional knee-jerk response, and they'll write it. And I'll literally sometimes say, like, please tell me where I said that, or please tell me whatever. And they'll like kind of, you look back, go with a fine-tooth comb, like, oh, like that's how much my emotional response made me write something that wasn't there. Or if you say something about one of my friends or family, then I'll be an asshole on a post or something. But so yeah, that's really what I meant by being an asshole. Is just and then sometimes really when I would look back at it, is if somebody would ask me a question that I, whether it was with maybe slightly sarcastic asshole or whatever it was, or, people give me shit. If I do an exercise that looks fucking cool, but you don't actually read the context of it, and people give me shit of like, oh, you're doing this just to look fucking cool or whatever, like my natural response would be like, hey, fucking dickhead, like read the question or read what it said, read the context of it, and then look to a post before and watch me front squat 405 if you want to see some hardcore shit. Like you're just missing the forest for the trees. So that'd be an example of me relapsing as an asshole. But then I realized sometimes it's like, I was that person. Like the story I gave right in the beginning is when someone was trying to teach me something and I was emotionally attached to it and I was just like angry about someone teaching me something. So I'm like, fuck, like this person's not better or worse than me. Like they could stay this person their whole life, or they could grow and develop and actually make progress and be like, look back like, man, why did I think that at some point in time? So even if someone is being an asshole or someone's, I feel like provoking me or whatever, I just try really, really hard to, like you said, have a response kind of like you said, or not answer if I don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
Go back to that.
I mean, the best response is no response.
Yeah, is no response. So it's that's
actually the best response is responding to the person that actually cares about the response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing I get myself too is like I've had people coming into the gym with me, like just big, somebody that's 50 pounds bigger than me, big jacked up meathead. I can see his fucking ego walking the door with him, chip on his shoulder. And I just talked to the guy where he realizes, like, I'm not trying to shove anything down your throat. I don't care if you want it or don't want it. I've literally had people, like, they bring their buddies in to train with me or whatever it is. And when I actually just have conversations with these people, this is the same guy that would give me shit online or whatever it is. And it's like, once we just get through some stuff and he's like, oh, I actually felt a muscle I didn't feel before. Oh, well, I actually am training hard. Oh, or something that I am proficient at, you're loading the shit out of me and still making me do some of the traditional things I thought I'd be doing. Where it's like, you might read a piece of something I do or a post, and it might be like, oh, that's stupid. Oh, that's tedious. It might just not be your thing. And I got to remember that. Sometimes I'm just not speaking somebody's language. And when I actually get with these, I've rarely had anyone that I've like meet with, talk with, have a conversation with, go through a session with where I'm like, oh, they weren't a huge asshole. Or maybe I got through some of their assholeness so we could both realize we're just human beings. And that's my whole thing too, is like, I just try and tell people too, is like, I love working out. Obviously it's my whole life and everything that goes into it. But like I always tell people too, which they take the wrong way. It's like, it's not that big of a deal to me. I mean, I'm at a point in time in my life where it's like, it's not my family, it's not religion, it's not politics. Like, that's the thing. That's honestly why I said I don't do nutrition and supplementation anymore, because that's worse than, religion or politics now having that. I just don't want to deal with it. I mean, I've never met, like, I feel like anything I say from anyone at any point in time, when I first learned all these very good nutrition information from people smarter than me, I was kind of excited about it and how it helped my clients. And then you're in an era now where if you say anything to anyone about anything, you're somehow wrong, you're somehow doing something wrong, something's out of context or not up to date with, and I'm like, fuck it, I don't care. I'll literally tell, here's how I eat, and here's the reason that I like to do that. So that's the other thing too, where I tell people, like, I think it's one of the best things that any coach can do as quick as possible is, like, it's important enough that I make my living it, I can spend X amount of hours a week doing it, but I try and be not emotionally attached to, it's just working out. I mean, it's awesome. It's like a lot of positive things have come through my life, but I'm not going to get in a fist fight over a hack squat or a bench press or whatever. It's just the nuts and bolts. Like, and I think that hopefully if you have that detachment from some of that stuff, you're less likely to have emotional reactions to the people that are having emotional reactions to you,
Yeah. I had a follow-up to that, but then I lost it. The reason I asked the question is because I'd say I'm a recovering asshole, because when I was still competing, that was my entire identity.
Yeah.
So I competed since, the age of between 82 and 2004.
Yeah.
And that was my number one priority. So
Yeah.
everything else, family, all that's just boom, not even close to being first. So that's why if you ever read any of my posts or any of my AMA things, when they ask me my biggest regret, it's how I treated my wife during the time and my kids, because it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
It wasn't right. And if I could go back, that would be the only thing. I'd change nothing else.
Yeah.
None of the injuries, none of that crap. I wouldn't change any of that. But that I would have changed, because I think I would have had the ability to change it. And if I did change it, I would have had more support.
Yeah.
I would have had support from the people that really mattered more from that standpoint.
Yep.
The one thing I think that we should touch on is, because we've been talking a lot about intermediate to advanced lifters and hypertrophies, I think we should spend a little time talking about beginners, because the one thing that, because you said why you don't do the nutrition, and it's worse than politics, and it's worse than all the other kind of stuff. What's even worse than all those is the fucking fitness industry.
Yeah.
To me, the strength bodybuilding strongman industry is kind of like its own little subculture of that. But when you get over into that, that fitness bullshit where nobody cares about anybody.
Yeah.
It's just about the dollar and the money and all the other kind of stuff. That's where a lot of the beginners, fall. Yeah. And the beginners will hear conversations like what we're having and start thinking, oh shit, am I actually using my lats? And it's, I always say you can't flex bone. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? My advice that I would throw out from the beginners from a strength standpoint is just start and learn proper technique and just start trying to move fucking weight. And if technique breaks, slow down the pace, get the technique under wraps and start moving it back up again, that you don't need a fucking coach. My greatest fear in today's industry, of the strength industry, of all three of the sports, and I guess you could consider CrossFit in there as well, but all four of those, is that somebody comes in as a beginner and hires a coach because they're never going to last. As soon as that coach is gone, as soon as they fire the coach, they quit because they didn't have that time like we had of just going in the gym and figuring shit out. I think that is a loss. And I think it's kind of up to all of us as people in the industry to kind of nudge and remind those guys that, hey, look, there's a lot of information out there. We can vet you to good articles, good pay sites, stuff like that. Go there and just start trying to figure shit out. Then once you figure it out and you overcome a couple sticking points, not your first one. I think people do this with steroids too. They hit one sticking point, they take a cycle, and they never learn, how to overcome it. Like, fuck, dude, you never even tried to increase your calories or your protein, or you never tried to do this, or you never tried low volume, high volume, and it's strength training. You never tried, it's like you just fucked up.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get another sticking point here in a month.
Yeah.
So what advice would you throw out? We're talking true beginners
Yeah,
now.
for sure.
People who are watching that, because YouTube is, we're live on all.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we're live on all podcasts, but we're live on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a young demographic.
Yeah.
So speaking more to the 18 to 21-year-olds, what's the best route?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Man, and there's 99% of me is thinking about all the things that you're saying, and that's like I think, in myself included, because once you get in it so long, but you really gotta ask yourself why you're doing the things that you're doing in the first place. Before you get into the nuts and bolts, because it's like, it doesn't ever, there could be a million different reasons, but you need to have a reason that's good for you. That's something that's going to keep you the whole thing dedicated and not motivated, and something ideally that's not super superficial, something that's not just 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And really kind of make sure that everything's built around that. Because at the end of the day, that's the whole thing, is I can almost give no recommendations for the nuts and bolts, right? Because it's like, well, the best thing that you can possibly do is now the thing that you're happy to repeat, 3 times a week, 5 times a week for the next decade, right? And it's like, so that's the whole thing where it's tough. It's like I could write, just if I had to put something on paper, let's write 100 different programs that are all great if you like it and you get into it, where you could argue like, well, do I have to do a back squat? Well, because the funny thing, I use examples like, I learned to squat from front squatting because I learned how to clean and jerk before I learned how to squat. And so when I did squats, I just did front squats. And it's like, did I do myself a disservice by not doing a back squat? I don't think so. Just whatever, it is what it is. And so random shit like that. So take some time to really think about why you're doing the things that you're doing. Ask yourself, can I do this for a long period of time? And then focus on the fun parts of it. If you think about, hopefully from conversations that you and I have, is where everything stems from, is like, it's the cliche stuff, but it's like camaraderie, it's work ethic, it's competition. Because that's the stuff, when I look back, it's like, and I'm definitely the type of person that likes to, if I see some tangible long-term benefit from it, if I suck at it, I'm going to work so much harder at it. So it's like, it's those things that really, I'm like, okay, why did I like working out so much? And it's like, I liked all those things. I liked the fact that I sucked at it, but I wanted to be good at it. So maybe that was the first thing I remember actually working hard at, even before sports. It's like sports, I was just a decent athlete at everything, so I could just be a good athlete at everything without working hard. I just wanted to be competitive. But then lifting has all that, man. It's got it's got the whole self-improvement aspect of I suck at this, so I've actually got to do some things to develop myself and get better at it. And then I was lucky enough to just start training with partners right away. We just, a bunch of buddies, went to the gym that had no idea what we were doing, and just we started bench pressing and curling and doing stupid shit for a little while, and then we just kind of figured stuff out, reading stuff and seeing what the bigger guys were doing that weren't assholes. And so I don't know. It sounds. I can say some nuts and bolts stuff after that, but it's focus on that stuff, because that's stuff that still gets me excited now, right? It's even to the point now where it's I'm still with what I've got, and within the context of what I'm doing, I really always want to try and be I honestly think I can always keep scraping out more from a training standpoint. I'm a realistic person, so it's not like scraping out more, like you said. For me, it might be like a pound of tissue where I want it every single year at this point. Again, if I just want to be maintainable, the stuff I can do till I'm 70. And I love training with other people. I love trying to hurt each other. I love kicking each other's ass. And so it's some of that stuff where if you focus on that stuff and really focus on how much fun that stuff is, then the nuts and bolts are going to be that much more easy to adhere to. And so I'd say overall, then just some of the stuff is pick some big movements, and repeat them frequently. Definitely start. I think it's bad, because I'm glad that I didn't. Don't start with a bro split. I think it's one of the worst things a new person can do. I don't care if you do total body a couple of times a week to start, or you do a upper lower or push pull. I think that's a better way to go about it. Just learn some big movements. If you practice it 3 times a week as opposed to once a week, you're going to get better at it faster. The only thing I wish that I'd had, and this is the toughest thing, and I would say maybe that this is where you look at some older bodybuilders, if you're into bodybuilding, look at older powerlifters. One of my things that drives me nuts, again, is the example of, we'll go to curls, because that's such an easy one to pick on, is you'll have guys that say, I built my biceps doing straight bar curls, and then when I got older, I had to switch because my elbows were fucked, and so now I only do dumbbells and cables. And it's like, no, you worked hard, and you had whatever capacity your genetics would take you with whatever exercise you did. You could have developed the same size biceps, never doing straight bar curls, and your elbows wouldn't be fucked along the way. So that's some of the stuff where it's a little tougher to learn. But have an idea of what some of the guys are figuring out 10 years into their career once they're fucked. And there's good information out there. You'll see some reoccurring themes where literally like 90% of the bodybuilding population says, I can't do that exercise anymore. I can't do that exercise anymore. And while you're inevitably going to get some kickback from some of your buddies that, oh, you fucking have to do that. You just like 90% of the big manly shit is good stuff to do in some version of it. But honestly, I think there's a couple movements that fit almost no one. They do the exact same thing to every single bodybuilder, and then they all just eventually evolve out of it as a result of injury, where it's like, and so that's the 1% where it's like, like you said, I would ever want anybody to get too caught up on the nuts and bolts. Do all that stuff first. Get something that's going to have you adhere. Enjoy your time in the gym, and do all the focus on all that fun stuff. Because again, it's that same thing. It's like I remember workouts from when I was 15, from when I was 20, from when I was 25. I remember one-off workouts, and then I remember whole periods of time in my life training with crews and stuff like that. And it's not the nuts and bolts and all that kind of stuff. It was the fact that it was so enjoyable and it was so much fun that I think was the biggest thing for adherence. And like you said, and then some of it's like. I 100% agree. I would hate to rob somebody of figuring it out. It's like, and I've had kind of came to this realization is like, I'm not genetically blessed as a bodybuilder. There's a fine line of like, I'm a fairly self-aware person. And so I don't ever want to use that as an excuse. So I could always keep pushing myself faster and faster, but I don't have to be an idiot to look at, everyone I've worked with at various points in time. And it was through the process of me having to figure shit out that was the catalyst to me wanting to do this as a profession and eventually be a coach at it. So to rob somebody of that, where if like, again, for sure, had I just been handed a coach and said, here's the things you have to do and here's the blah, blah, blah right away, it's like, fuck, would I have had the adherence? Would I have had the thought process? And it's like, no. Luckily it wasn't that thing, especially in the bodybuilding world, it didn't exist for one. And then if it did exist, it was like, fuck, it was like Charles Glass back then. Like that would have been it. Like, I know that guy, I'm going to go train with him. And my parents would be like, fuck no, we don't have any money. So, you're going to sit here and train in your YMCA and your Bally's and your Golds or whatever it is. So, yeah, that'd be some of the stuff that I would say to start and to focus on. And then, and then pick up the nuts and bolts based off of, like I said, individuals and experience. That is the beauty of Instagram and the beauty of internet is you kind of know who it's not hard to realize who some of the top coaches are. They've walked the walk. They're working with people that it's not an accident. They're working with them. You'll see a consistent theme. That's the funny thing when you'll say like Instagram is full of people trying to get attention, doing circus shit and stuff that looks cool or whatever. And it's a smallest, weirdest pet peeve, but I'll have people tell me sometimes as a compliment, like, man, you're really creative. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I may or may not be creative, but I have like these set of principles that occasionally I'll build the tool off of. And so it's, again, someone will put something like, oh, that looks fucking cool and different. I'm going to show this because it's going to get fucking likes. And I may have something that you might not have seen exactly before, but let's talk about why I'm doing it because it's that was built for a thing or for a reason. So when you see somebody that has like really consistent, and it's like I can name 50 coaches where their content is consistent because they stay in their wheelhouse, they stay within their principles and things, they might grow and expand out of that. And it's like, oh, okay, like I'm going to pick up some things from this guy or from that guy. And that is the beauty of if you can have a small percentage of your focus on that and the big percentage of focus on what you're actually getting done and doing in the gym on a daily basis, I think that'd be a pretty good way to go about it.
Yeah. See, for me, I was fortunate to start in a powerlifting gym.
Yeah.
So I had guys there, showing me I did have a little bit of time of training in a garage and doing stupid shit, but it wasn't, as soon as my dad realized I had desire, to be able to do that, he put me into a private gym, which happened to be all powerlifters.
Yeah.
And, I knew at the time, that I was younger than what they are. So I kind of had to find my way. I kind of had to find my place, that they weren't going to embrace me and say, hey, here, do this.
Yeah.
So I had to like be there when they were there. So I always made sure I was there when they were there. Then when they were there, I made sure that I was always training hard.
Yeah.
So I was visible. I wasn't evasive. I wasn't, hitting them up with thousands of questions. I was just trying to be seen for working hard.
Yeah.
And then after a period of time, they're like, hey, kid, come here. Let me show you this. And then you kind of move your way into a group. Yeah. And I think, my story here, I think, can help a lot of kids if they want to be, a meathead, because a meathead's a different version here. You already stated you got to really define what you really want to do.
Yeah.
You know, because if you just want to train with your bros, go train with your bros.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to be, you know, a meathead or a competitive bodybuilder, powerlifter, or anything like that, you're going to have to get around those people. That doesn't mean you can just walk in their gym and train with them. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You know, so as soon as I, you know, became the strongest at that gym, I had to find a better gym. You know, so I went to college. Where are the powerlifters at?
Yeah.
And then again, it's when do they train? You know, I don't know them.
Yeah.
You know, and then you train the same time they train, and it may take 3 or 4 months before you develop. This is going back 20 some years too. Before you develop a relationship of, hey, you need a spot. Let me spot you. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, what meet you training for? And then you're training together with that group, and then you become the strongest in that gym. Then you move on, you know, to the next gym. But it's the same. It's the same thing every gym you go to. It's not like I was never welcomed. Like, come train. Westside was the only place that was invited. But it was like, you found where the best were. It's like, okay, this is where Bob Wallace, George Crawford, some of the best powerlifters of all time train. I'm gonna go there and train. I don't know them, but if I train and maybe they see me squatting, you know, they'll walk over, they'll say something. And that's where, from that standpoint, that's where I got the best advice. Is always putting myself where people were better than what I was, and if I was the better one, I had to go somewhere else. You know, until I ended up being somewhere where I couldn't be the best. You know, and then you learn. The other thing was, you know, to be humble, you know, and not just expect that they're going to welcome you into their club. You know, and I don't know if it's still that way today or not, you know, but it's just basic gym ethics, I think, is what has been lost a little bit. You know, a lot of people don't train in groups and all this other stuff, but all that crap aside, you know, the thing from training and why I still do it now and will until the day I die is, you know, it's, and people are like, you know, when you're on your deathbed, you're never going to think about this. And I've been close to fucking being on my deathbed. And you know what? I did think about this. So they can fuck off because they don't know what they're talking about. You know, I was thinking back about some of the things that you were talking about, some of the fucking brutal workouts, some of the best lifts I made, you know, and so it's when it's a huge part of your life, you're most definitely going to be thinking. I'm not saying I didn't think about my wife, my kids, and other things, but it was there. Of course. You know, it was definitely there. And but those memories, those type of things are what you want to work on building. Like, you know, it's sometimes, you know, even as a beginner, push yourself fucking really hard, man. Test yourself, even if everybody tells you it's stupid. And you know what? It is fucking stupid. But do it for you. You know, because you walk away like, fuck I could do that. You know, then you start wondering, what else can I do? You know, and then that's what becomes that almost addictive type of thing. And then the gym becomes your place to go. That's an escape. You know, it's like, this isn't school, you know. And I always, you know, I have the videos about the void. It's, you get into that one set, man, and it's just a fucking brutal set, man. As soon as that set starts, your fucking brain, you're gone. You're like in this void space, man. Nothing matters. You know, fucking business don't matter, wife don't matter, kid, fucking nothing matters except the next rep. And then the next rep, and the next rep. And then when you come out, you're breathing hard and you puke. But for that fucking 15 seconds, there's nothing better. You know, it's what I fucking live for sometimes. You know, it's like, it's fucked up. But I think that when you really I think you got to live for like 10 years to really understand what the fuck I'm talking about. But then you got to realize once you like cross that 10 years or 12 years, you're a fucking meathead for life. You know, I don't know how to get out. You know, it's bodybuilders seem to have a better exit plan than powerlifters do. Because they downsize and move on you know, pretty quick. You know, powerlifters, it's not the same thing. They'll quit, you know, and just stop because they can't handle being weaker, you know, and it's going to happen, you know, it happens to everybody.
For sure.
You just find different goals, different objectives, and kind of move forward from there. Do we have any questions that came through the feed?
There was one that Joe touched upon a little bit, and I don't know if this is going to be a good one or not, but it was similar to that topic. But it was, my elbows can't handle a whole lot of direct arm work anymore, but when I do compound movements like rows and dips, it seems like all the growth goes to my body and not my arms. Any good tips on arm development with compound movements, or how to get the most out of the little isolation I can handle?
You know, so I guess one preface is a little bit of a tough question to answer because it would help if I could show you. But let's go with first for isolation stuff. I mean, the easy, not easy thing to see is if you're using gravity, just make sure that your upper arm is perpendicular to the ground, and that's that. And that sounds easy, but everyone fucks it up. So if you're doing a skull crusher and your elbows are bent out this way, and obviously not perpendicular to the ground, and you're going up and down, with the dumbbell, you're eventually going to wreck your elbow. So it comes into the thing where even if you can do a skull crusher, single arm across your body, and you have your upper arm perpendicular straight up and down to the ground, that's your place for that. Same for curls. I can't do a curl like this, but if I can do a single arm standing or I can do a single arm preacher, those are the ways that you do isolation movements. And if you think about it, it gets fucking tedious, and especially when you're doing triceps, that's where it's the blasphemy to say, but cables come in place, especially for tricep type stuff, is because instead of looking at gravity, you look at the cable, you want that cable to align with your upper arm. As far as compound movements go, I honestly think that's one of the things for arms that can be neglected, is compound movements work really well, because if you basically just get, your forearm and your elbow relatively stacked in the same plane, they're pretty elbow healthy. The trick to making them more, I would say, if you're trying to do some sort of row or chin movement and make them more bicep dominant, if you're using gravity, I hope I can articulate this right, is you don't want your hand and your elbow stacked. So again, if I'm doing a close grip press and I have my hand stacked directly above my elbow, it's really mainly a shoulder exercise. There's going to be some tricep involvement. But if I have my hand staggered, and this is where if you look at, what's it called, like a jam press type deal. I mean, that's the whole point of what the difference. And it doesn't have to be that drastic of that type of press. Is if you're doing a press and you just let your hand come towards your elbow or your shoulder joint, doesn't have to be that far, but somewhere in between, then it's going to be much more of a tricep exercise and in turn less of a delta exercise. And the same thing could be said for chins or for rows. If you're doing a chin, if you're pulling your forearms perpendicular to the ground, it's going to be predominantly going through your shoulder joint, whereas if you get your elbows in front of your body, you literally try and bring your hand closer to your shoulder, it's going to be much more of a bicep type movement. And that's just an overview, but that's probably the biggest trick or the biggest hack, I would say, for those. And the problem that people have with those is, in turn, as a result, you probably won't be able to handle quite as much load. So if you try and close grip press, keeping that hand stacked right over the elbow, that's generally the way you can tolerate the most load. As soon as you start to get it off, and instead of using some of your bigger stuff around your shoulder joint, you're using predominantly just your elbow extensors, your triceps, the load's going to drop a little bit. So people think, as soon as load's going down, it's not as much of a mass builder. Again, if you're speaking bodybuilding, the goal isn't as much load as you can tolerate. It's how much load can I get to that individual muscle group.
The weight's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's the tension and on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got another one here. Trying to build as much muscle in my back as possible. What are some of your favorite movements for building mass there?
So if we're just talking back, I'm going to have to start with some sort of deadlift variation. Because it's obviously you have all of your erectors and you have obviously your traps can play a big portion of that. Indirectly, obviously, you have your lats involved if you're doing it right, but I wouldn't ever say that in and of itself it's a great lat builder. So I would say with the deadlift variation, again, if we're speaking from the bodybuilding world, don't get attached to the arbitrary. So again, if you're someone that was born, you're Mr. Long Legs McGee and Mr. T-Rex Arms, you might not have to deadlift to the floor, which again is blasphemy for some. But if you're a bodybuilder, you get guys that deadlift to the floor because they feel like they have to, and then over time you just destroy all the discs in your back. So it might be as simple as, again, if people that get so caught up on the arbitrary, someone can deadlift with perfect form and a neutral spine. Okay, that same person, God decided to make, their humerus an inch shorter, and now they don't have that hip mobility, and they just have to round their spine completely to get there. And now the bodybuilding world says they're a bad human because they can't deadlift to the floor with a neutral spine. So that person just uses an inch block or does some sort of rack deadlift variation. So that's the subtle little things, again, in the bodybuilding world. Don't get too attached to the arbitrary. At the end of the day, fucking plate diameter is arbitrary. Then from there, it's going to be some sort of rowing motion. This is where I would say, I'm a big advocate of chest-supported rowing motions. So again, the stuff that can move your scapula and the stuff that can move your upper arm. Now, again, this could be, someone's going to say, I'm saying a T-bar row is bad. No, a T-bar row, maybe if you could only do one exercise, is a decent place to start. But if you're doing a T-bar row without a chest support, it might be all of your erectors to fatigue before your scapula and before the stuff that can move your upper arm fatigues. So for that reason, a chest-supported row, I think, is one of the best things for building an upper back if we're just talking back. And then the subtle differences, if we're talking lats, you got to have something where your arm can comfortably move, at your side. And so I'd like to say that could be some sort of pull up or pull down. If I'm being a purist, people will hate me for this, but it would generally have to be some sort of machine. When you talk training lats, just the way the profile of your lats work is it's way, way stronger here and way, way, way weaker here. And if you understand, obviously, the mechanics of a pull-up or a free weight, you can't reproduce that. The best machines, and again, if you want to be hardcore and cool, at least most of the best machines are hardcore. This like Nautilus stuff is still some of the best stuff. They haven't changed the patents a whole lot. A lot of the stuff now is complete garbage. But stuff that is loaded heavier here and lighter here. That being said, someone's going to say, well, pull-ups are a fucking great exercise. It's all about the individual. So again, is not the perfect profile still adequate stimulus to grow a great back? Of someone it is. I mean, look at, again, we use the Ronnie Coleman example, who built his back entirely off of free weights. So again, if I'm giving my best answers, those be it deadlift variation, chest supported row variation, and maybe some sort of machine pull down. And then we get in a whole argument of accessibility, usability. Then you might say maybe a pull-up's better, because everybody can do pull-ups. But there's somewhere in those big three categories I would probably start.
Okay. Anything you want to add on there, Dave?
No, I would actually agree 100%. Even with, the pull-up thing, the only caveat there is, if they're strong enough to be able to do a solid set, a good set. So to me, that's, knees tucked up behind, neutral spine, pulling chest to the bar, flexing. Yeah. They're strong enough to do 20 reps in one set, then they can use that instead of the pull down. Yeah, you're going to have
a big back, yeah.
Then they're going to be able to use their lats. But even with a pull down unit, it may not be the straight bar. You may have to change different bars to be able to feel it in the lats, but that's what it's going to take. And as he said, a lot of the machines are built off cams, and you got to be able to feel the lats there. The deadlift, I agree 100%. A lot of people are going to have to use blocks. I like blocks better than I do pins, to be able to pull off of. If we're just talking back development. Yeah. It's just nonsense. And the chest supported row, I'm 1,000% on because, even if you get into a seal row, which becomes popular then goes away. Yeah. A seal row, you end up doing a hyperextension most of the time, which is just cramping the shit out of you. You train your spinal erectors using, back raises, reverse. There's other things just for your spinal erectors. But with most people today, the spinal erectors and the abs, the obliques, the psoas, basically the whole core is weak. That across the board, it's weak, just terribly weak with most people that I see. So you put them on a T-bar row. It's like, man, this is just a matter of weeks. Yeah. Until this guy strains his back. Yeah. Put him on chest supported row and get the elbow position right. There you go. The only thing I change if it's somebody that we're working their bench is I'm going to have their elbows in a different position based upon what their weak point is on their bench. But that's not training their lats. That's training their upper back to be able to support the bar, at the top of the bench. But those are my exact picks.
Okay. Here's one you guys could both answer. Best method or exercises to build the traps? Just from your experience, obviously it's going to be individualized, but.
Okay, I guess I'll get cracking.
And you don't have to answer these guys. We
no, it's a good question. So it's one of those things where again, it's you got to look a teeny bit at genetics. I hate to repeat it because someone. Just, in my opinion, especially your upper traps, and then he gets, mid-lower traps can be a little bit trickier to target. But traps, especially what people are talking about when they say traps, are just to keep your shoulder blades, and as a part of your shoulder blades, your arms from ripping off of your body. So loaded shit is probably, for most people, a great place to start. And again, if I'm going to get specific, I love something like, banded deadlifts, banded rack deadlifts, where again, you're just getting to a position where you're holding enough load at the top. You're just the amount of tension on your upper traps at that point in time. It's probably there's no other way to get that kind of load on it. You could have someone that can deadlift 500 pounds, holding 700 pounds at the top, and so I would personally say with that. And then depending on the person, someone will probably need more isolation work than somebody else. So I think shrug variations are fine. Because again, at the end of the day, someone's like, I can do deadlifts all day and my traps get massive. And if I add some shrugs, then I'll just like look like a fucking retard with, traps even bigger. So it's kind of the same as I think with a lot of body parts. You get people that say that have good genetics that will swear by, you only need this compound movement. And then the reality is where someone needs to direct a little bit more isolated tension towards somebody, some isolation stuff can go in conjunction with its thing. If a guy has bad genetics, I wouldn't say, well, you have to do all shrugs. I'd say, no, you might have to kind of program both a little bit more. And then it's not to say that, row variations, and especially where row variations, if we're talking more mid and lower traps, some depending on the elbow position and what you're cueing to move first and move last, I would say that's probably, again, depending on the part of the trap we're talking about, that'd be the third place I'd have, probably add something in.
Me coming from a powerlifting perspective and just strength and conditioning perspective, traps are a side effect of training everything else hard. So it really doesn't need to be done. If I do have somebody that I feel traps are a weak point in hindering their strength for any reason whatsoever, which is usually very unlikely, I'm going to rely on something like a high shrug using a standing calf machine, just because I don't want their grip is already taxed, and grip is easily overtrained and very important when it comes to powerlifting. So, bodybuilders use straps to be able to get more lat activation and all that. Powerlifters won't use straps. So the last thing I want them to do is to put heavy loads in their hands for fucking traps, where they can shrug on a standing cab machine and be done with it. Very rarely will I suggest that. And I don't have a lot of people that are saying, I need to build my traps up, because if they're deadlifting enough, it's not going to be it's not going to be a question. It will, if anything, it will become from a bodybuilding aesthetic standpoint, if they're doing enough of the right heavy stuff, it's going to be more of a hindrance. Then it's going to throw their shoulder look and symmetry off, because their traps will get too big. And now you're stuck with, we got to add your 2 more inches wider on your shoulders. Which is way harder to do than to drop an inch off the traps.
That's the better. That's the better answer. Honestly, I should have said that. It's because it is, when I really think about it. Most guys that come to me that say want to have bigger traps, and if they're like wanting to be a bodybuilder, I'm like, you don't need bigger traps. I mean, almost no bodybuilder actually needs bigger traps. And then it comes back to somebody who just want to look like fucking, mean. I want to look that kind of have that fucking mean trap bulldog look. Then okay, then we can do traps. And like you said too, you nailed it. I can't believe I forgot to say this too. Is like safety bar squats and front squats. It's like if you're doing those things, you're gonna have some thick traps. Like you can't be, no one front squats 400 plus pounds and doesn't have thick traps.
Well, I think where people might be misunderstanding is they don't actually know the anatomy of the trap. They don't know how long.
How far down they go in your spine.
How far they go. Let alone how high the erectors actually go. They just think the traps are
upper trap.
This little thing right here. I mean, we're talking a big ass strong muscle that does a lot. And you can't, well, I guess you can a little bit, but you can't specifically target just the top of the trap. It's not how muscles move.
All right. This one's kind of in both of your guys' wheelhouse a little bit. What is the best way for a powerlifter to program hypertrophy in a strength program, or should the two be programmed separately?
I'm going to let Dave answer that.
I mean, have you been asked that question before, Dave? I would imagine.
Yeah, I have. And it really, I mean, this is going to become, I'm going to try to not let it become complex. It depends upon the style of periodization somebody's using for their training. So if they're using a block style of periodization, where each block is going to have a specific phase that's going to concentrate just on one area with maybe some transitional phases in there, then you can have hypertrophy blocks that would fall in there. And during that hypertrophy block, there's really not going to be any strength work or any power type of development or any of that other stuff. It's just straight hypertrophy. That's where, depending upon the length of the block and how it's set up, say if it's extended to be 6 weeks or 8 weeks, that's where you could get with somebody that just specializes in hypertrophy. And I would actually recommend that. Get with somebody that just specializes in how to teach you how to activate and move the muscles. Could be a very beneficial thing, because one of the things that I run into with straight powerlifters is they get start having lockout problems as they become more advanced. And I'm trying to teach them to pull the bar apart, which means they got to flex their triceps. They don't know how to flex their triceps. They've never been taught how to flex their triceps. So I can take any intermediate bodybuilder and sit them at a table and say, flex your pec, flex your pec, flex your tricep, flex your and without movement of anything, just slight twitches, they can flex every body part in their body. I can do that with a power lifter, and they can flex their pecs at best. They don't have that mind-muscle control, where when you're dealing at that top level and it's a tricep that's holding that lift back, I have to be able to get them to activate that mind-muscle control, which is why I'm an advocate of isolation movements for powerlifters, because they need to learn how to be able to do that. And that's only one reason for that. If they go to somebody that specializes in that, and they're not going to get beat down with super heavy loading, which is going to, hurt the later cycles, then I can see a necessity for that. If they're using a conjugate style or a concurrent style training, that's now where a lot of these modalities or a lot of entities of the conditioning are being flowed through the entire program. So there's always hypertrophy in there. There's always speed in there. There's always strength in there. There's always power in there. There's always conditioning in there. It just, changes a little bit throughout each phase. Then I don't see any purpose to have a hypertrophy phase. It's already built into the program. It's just not going to build the hypertrophy that somebody just doing hypertrophy is going to have. But if they're a power lifter who gives a fuck, because this happened to me. I ended up bodybuilding for 3 years in college. I gained 25 pounds of lean body mass, ended up going from 235 to, I don't know what I competed, 220 or whatever, but off-season weight 260, 275. When I went back to powerlifting and competed as a powerlifter, my total was 200 pounds less in a weight class higher. All right, so I put a ton of muscle on, but got weak as fuck. Now, a lot of that was neural. A lot of that is because I'm a very explosive lifter. So I lost a lot of those capacities. But I put on a ton of muscle mass, but got weaker. So that's my issue there is if that muscle mass you're putting on isn't going to make you stronger and you're a power lifter, then it's stupid. It's dumb. I could flip it in reverse and say, if you're a bodybuilder and you want to focus on building the biggest fucking squat you can, that's fucking stupid, because it's going to, that squatting 800 pounds or 700 pounds for reps, instead of building the volume and, the blood and everything that you need to create the growth in there, is going to do more damage to the joints than it's going to do building any muscle. So blown out quad tendons isn't going to help you much on stage. And if you look at the strongest power lifters and compare their leg development to not even a pro bodybuilder, a national bodybuilder, there's a night and day difference. There's a reason for that. Now, the power lifters are way stronger from what they can squat. So if you're a beginner, yes, you can play around in two worlds. Intermediate, you can play around in two worlds. But at some point in time, I seriously think you need to make a choice. Now, if it's a linear style program, which is more progressive overload, old school type thing, then there is a hypertrophy phase in there as well, which will fall back more on what I stated about the block training. I'm sorry for the very exaggerated answer, but there are different styles of periodization, and there's different styles of bodybuilding training as well, from high volume, low volume, HIIT training, the multiple different styles that fall in there as well. And you have to be able to, I believe if you take this shit seriously, you have to understand what these different styles are to at least be able to have a conversation about them. So if you're a strength coach and you don't know what linear periodization is, block periodization, conjugate periodization, concurrent periodization, and so forth, then you probably need to go back to the books and learn what they are, and then test yourself and say, okay, what is 5-3-1? What is the cube method? What is, the juggernaut method? What is the West Side method? Where do they all fall? Where do they all fit? And bodybuilding, you got things which are more HIIT oriented and things that are more high volume oriented. And I let Joe speak more on this. It's his, wheelhouse. I've only kind of dabbled in it here and there, but that would be my jump off for that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's all that I wouldn't really add anything to programming because I don't do any programming for powerlifting. So that's the only thing I'll ever help any type of strength athlete, strength based. So whether it's a powerlifter or occasionally like a strongman or something, is just efficiency of exercises, and then someone that knows how to program in with the program that they've got. So that's, again, it's kind of beating a dead horse, but it's like if you're a powerlifter, you don't need your elbows for big biceps, so you need your elbows for being able to do all the movements you need to do. So it's like even more so than bodybuilders, it's like, why would you feel a need to do any fucking movement? Because you have to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest thing. I'll just occasionally be like, look, just put this movement instead of that movement, this movement instead of that movement. And then some of it is a matter of efficiency too, where like that's where I get kind of into the profile thing, where I'll literally look at some exercises where it's like, you're going through this whole range of motion, but only, really 10% of it or 20% of it are you really producing, any given amount of significant force that could actually have whatever adaptive change you want. Obviously hypertrophy within your program. So if we can take that out and put this movement in, that's why I say for every, obviously, like you said earlier, the intensity for powerlifting tends to be one of the more bigger things that you really obviously have to deload. So my little thing in bodybuilders is like, you don't have to deload. You don't load in the first place. No. But both camps should be concerned about volume, and especially the longer you want to train. Volume's the killer, man. I mean, volume's the thing eventually that will cause the more issues than anything else, I think.
Yes, it's wear and tear.
Yeah, it's the wear and tear. And that's the thing is for certain things, I mean, I used to be, again, the purist of me wants to say these perfect exercises in this perfect world will cause there's nothing that causes because it's imperfect people doing imperfect exercises. So to some, as bad as it sounds, like you've got a shelf life. You've only got so much in your knees or certain body parts. So that's the only things that I'll ever address from a programming standpoint for powerlifters, strength people is occasionally let's make sure that these exercises, that the whole goal is, obviously you're just trying to put on some muscle, in whatever capacity, let's make sure we're not wrecking something that you need along the way. And two, if we can do something with 2 sets instead of 4 sets, let's do that with an exercise that has a better profile. Mm-hmm. And so those are the only things that I won't really ever go past any other steps forward, like Dave mentioned, into what type of programming they're doing, because that's not my deal.
Okay. This one's pretty general. It might be too general. If it is, let me know. But it was, if the goal is hypertrophy, which periodization model would be best to apply to the intermediate lifter, concurrent or blocks, and will strength suffer?
You can take that. I mean, there really is not one. I mean, bodybuilding is its own model of training. You have to still watch the volume, and I'll let Joe speak on waving volume and stuff like that, but that's still so... I mean, I can write a program that's going to wave your volume, 10%, 20% every week for, say 3 weeks up, 2 weeks down, 4 weeks up, 2 weeks down. But if your effort isn't where it's supposed to be, that's an irrelevant factor. So I'll just leave it at that. There's not going to be a block bodybuilding program. No, wait, let me stop. Somebody will fucking create it and sell it. I'll guarantee it. There's not going to be a conjugate bodybuilding program, because it's just, bodybuilding is about hypertrophy. It's about building muscle, and then, let's define bodybuilding here first. Competitive bodybuilding is about developing lean body mass that can be displayed on stage, 1 year to the next year at a higher level than it was the year prior. Either with more muscle or a better look. That's competitive bodybuilding. Recreational bodybuilding can't be defined. There's a million different ways to define that. So from the competitive bodybuilding standpoint, the overreaching goal is a better look each year. Mm-hmm. So even with that, and I'll let you take that from here, but you can put on too much muscle. You can get too fat. You can get too, go ahead and take over from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already answered the question, which is like, again, coming back to what I originally said is like, programming for bodybuilding, and especially having some sort of periodization, it's like the most complicated programs that you'll see when someone tries to make it complicated, it's because it's so much easier to sell that than it is to actually, what I said, address. Like I got my hands tied if you want me to sell you a program, because again, it's like some people don't ever need to, you don't need a recovery phase. You don't need to lower your volume. You don't need to lower your intensity because you're not having adequate stimulus for you to even like take a fucking long nap. And so it's so individualized because again, like even within the powerlifting world, you know, if you're having someone working off percentages, they can only sandbag for so long, you know, so eventually intensity is going to be something that you're going to have to regulate to a degree, you know, unless there's just some crazy whatever. But that's for bodybuilding, in my opinion, there's no mass programming that could say, here's the way this goes up and down and blah, blah, whatever. When I actually work with someone one-on-one, I honestly just regulate their volume on an individual basis. And that's about it because it's so much, again, because looking at when we had your talking, which is such a good conversation because everybody uses terminology differently, you know, talking about what are we talking about with volume, what are we talking about with load and, or maximal load. And it's like the thing that I talk about too with like, you know, it's the cliche thing that people leave out of the volume equation, especially with what I'm concerned about in the bodybuilding world, is, you know, if I take a barbell and you got the guy that's in the gym that drops it, bounces it, and then finds some muscle for that much range of motion, how much volume is that compared to someone that lowers a weight, has no momentum, and then contracts the muscle on up? There's 4 times the volume within that one rep. And so it's that big of a deal where it's like the whole rest of the equation means fuck all. If that's the difference that could be that's actually occurring. That's not like a crazy scenario. You walk in a gym and there's somebody bouncing and using, you know, muscles for a quarter of a rep, and there's someone using their muscles the entire rep. And then when we get into exercise selection and things like that, we have a very interesting conversation back to time under tension. Is like, you know, the thing that you could talk about that too is all the time under tension bullshit I joke comes from the best that should be called from research is time of participation.
Yeah. Because
it's like somebody's, we showed in this person that 40 seconds is more than 60. Like they're sitting on the machine and something's moving, but by my definition, like their quad's not fucking working for 60 seconds. They're pausing, they're braking, they're bouncing, they're all over the place. So that's a whole other thing where it's like, you know, if you're actually looking, and then they exclude profiles as well too. So again, if we look at a lateral raise and we're like, okay, well they did 60 seconds of a lateral raise. Well, it's like your muscle's really only working hard right here. Like what if we did an exercise that the entire time you're moving, you're actually at peak force production of that muscle group for the entire range of motion. It just throws all that shit out the window. So yeah, most of the time, if there's any type of really complex programming or periodization in the bodybuilding world, it tends to be people that are like the science, either nerd people or that are selling their complex program. And I'm like, you don't know if the person's training hard or not training hard. So all the rest of that is just bullshit. And it tends to be the people like I'll see that kind of poo-poo the hard workers of the bodybuilders where it's just like, oh, well, you don't have any programming. You don't have this. It's the people you're not working hard. It's the person that's excited to look at their programming and read it over as opposed to actually go in the gym and actually do anything. So
here's the question I would ask anybody that is intermediate or lower, if they're really serious about building muscle, if they're really serious about hypertrophy, how frequently are they measuring their body parts? Mm-hmm. How frequently are they having their body fat tested? And just those two, how frequently are they taking pictures of themselves? Yeah. All right, and having that done by somebody they trust, not a trainer, because it's very easy to manipulate calipers. Yeah. And I would use, if I was to suggest, I would use Perillo's 12-site caliper. Mm-hmm. I would take every fuck caliper you could take, you know, just so you have a reference guide. And if you are not doing that, or you've been trying to build muscle for a year and you've not done that once in the year, then you don't give a fuck about building muscle. Yeah. Not at all, because you have no quantifying or qualifying reference that lets you know if you're moving forward or not. Mm-hmm. Now, there is going to be, and I'll let Joe answer this, there's going to be some waist changes as you're gaining weight. Mm-hmm. So what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, I don't know. That's not my territory. Yeah. I want powerlifters to get as fat and strong as they can. Then when they can't get stronger anymore, drop weight classes. Yeah. You know, that's kind of the rule there. But what would be acceptable if they're trying to put on weight, build mass from a waist standpoint?
Yeah, it's really funny, man. That's a conversation that a lot of smart coaches like to have conversations about. And it really had me think, and honestly, I kind of came to a different answer on that than I've heard too many people say. So either that means I'm dumb or it's a different answer for a different perspective. But because I've seen success both ways. And so the way that I've seen it is I've seen most people will say, and most coaches that have themselves and put on a shit ton of muscle on, a lot of people will say at some point in time you got a dirty bulk. Mm-hmm. Just because success leaves clues. Like you won't talk to anybody with, 99% of people that are massive will tell you at some point in time they had this dirty bulk, and that's the best way to do it. Now, the funny part, too, is that if you talk to someone, like if you did talk to Paul Quinn, he'd say you didn't have any business putting on muscle if you're over 10% body fat. He'd say every single person, you get below 10% body fat, and then you put on muscle. And his argument, which I can't disagree with, was like from a hormonal standpoint, where it's just saying like you get someone that hormonally, if you're 30% body fat, hormonally you're not in a great place where you're going to have this response to, one, the training, but two, the food that you're putting in your body. And so then I looked at myself, honestly, like I always because obviously it's the only person 100% what you've done. And the 2 times I put on the most muscle in my life, one was a super dirty bulk. Was like my freshman year of college. I went from 155 to 185 in about 9 months. And it was like literally the only time, every other time I'd think about trying to say I eat a lot, I'd just be lying. It's the only time I legit ate like 6,000 calories a day for that whole time. The next time my next best progress was when I went to Paul Quinn's course for the first time, and he put calipers on me and basically told me that I had love handles, and I thought it was fucking hilarious. And but I've been doing the bodybuilding for so long that I was like, you just have to, if you're a bodybuilder, you eat 600 grams of carbs every day, and that's what you do because I'm trying to get bigger. And I had to a point where I remember very specifically because I had the same coach do the measurements. I was 210 and like 16% body fat. And then I went and did all the stuff that Paul Quinn stuff, where I got lean, in theory, improved my insulin sensitivity, improved my hormones. Again, no other difference in any other stuff. And in 1 year, I went from, 210 and 16% body fat to 222 and like 11% body fat. And I did it, I got lean, and then I built upon that. I probably never got above 12 or 13% the other way around. So anyway, my take home is I think the 2 things that go hand in hand with both of those is the mindset to do something that you don't want to do. And meaning, because we get guys that are stuck in the perma bulk. They're like, oh, I got a dirty bulk, and they dirty bulk for their whole life. And then honestly, if you're a bodybuilder, you want to look good at some point in time. I don't care what the percentage is, but you'll look bigger when you're a little bit leaner, aside from when you're wearing a quadruple XL, muumuu. So it's some guys get stuck in this perma bulk, and the reality is they don't want to cut because they're emotionally attached to this feeling of being as big as humanly possible, and it's hard. And so it's the same thing. Like I had been pushing the calories for so long, I didn't want to cut. I didn't want to pull in. I didn't want to have any period of restrictive because I felt like I was moving backwards. Where in reality, just cleaning shit up and doing stuff a little bit more, what I'd say efficiently. And this is the whole nutrition talk where I think there is something to be said for food quality, which again, the macro people will, beat me up for that one, but whatever. So I focused on quality of things that I was doing and all that kind of stuff. I did a lot of stuff that I didn't want to do for a long period of time and put on the most, probably equal amounts of lean tissue in about a year period of time, both ways. And if you look at the people that make the best progress, they're willing to do things that are horrible and make them uncomfortable. So whatever that means to the individual, do one of them. Because that's when I was eating 6,000 calories a day, that was also horrible. I mean, I didn't like it. People think that's fun.
No,
but
it's
it was
terrible.
fucking horrible. And I'm at the point now where people joke because probably not competing anymore. We'll see. But when I'm not competing or pushing, like I just rather not eat. I remember reading or hearing an interview with Jay Cutler saying that when I was young and thinking like they asked him what his favorite meal was and he said not eating, and I was like, guy's full of shit. He's trying to sound like fucking cool. I don't know what I thought at the point in time, but man, it's so true. After you push calories for like a decade plus, you're like, fuck, I'd rather just not have to worry about my next meal and just skip. That's what intermittent fasting was. Jay Cutler was doing it before everybody else because he just didn't want to eat, so he decided to not eat.
I'm the same way. My weight stays up at. I ate this morning. I ain't yet.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just not eat. It's easier to be hungry. But now when I'm dieting and trying to lose weight, it's like every hour and a half. It's like I'm looking for that fucking meal. But
right.
I wonder with Paul Quinn saying, and this is just me kind of thinking out loud, from the times that I did get lean, there's a wicked fucking rebound once you get lean.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, getting to 10% is... For a lot, probably the leanest they've ever been in their life. Yeah,
for sure.
So I wonder if some of that gain or some of that is because of the rebound.
For sure.
Unless they hold the 10%.
Yeah.
Was there any rules on how long you should stay 10%?
No, he kind of had a range after that. Well, I mean, Paul Quinn had a lot of this stuff that was like when you're in there, it's like this perfect theory of what would happen with stuff.
Yeah.
And so the thing, you get some people that could just bulk continually under 10%. That's where I took like these things and okay, let's individualize and see what I can actually apply to clients. But that was the main, and again, this is the funny thing to me that, again, talking about nutrition, but the rebound coming off of a show, every bodybuilder has it, or everyone comes off of getting lean, is your insulin sensitivity is fucking great. You get this period of time where what you're eating, you're so depleted, your muscle glycogen low, and basically you're just driving everything into your muscle. And so, some population, like there's the term now, which I think is hilarious, like the insulin fairy, where it's like people just take stuff out of context, where people will say not to worry about insulin and insulin response at all because it doesn't fucking matter. It's all calories in and calories out. Hopefully you don't even know about these people because it just drives me nuts.
No,
but the thing is, it's like, it's like what they're saying is for Mrs. Jones, that's 40% body fat. Or she shouldn't be concerned about, does this give me a good or bad insulin response? Yes, she should be concerned about trying to figure out what a deficit is in the first place. But then when you're lean and you're an athlete, I think insulin sensitivity is a real concern as far as how that relates to your body fat percentage, as it relates to the food, as it relates to a certain extent nutrient timing. I think that is an important thing as well. So there's definitely, that's the whole reason from personal experience, having done that from being just the perma bulk to actually leaning back down to seeing how my body worked after that point, is I attribute it to my body just worked better, which could be a whole, like, it's the thing that I did different from bulk stuff. It was just the first time I was concerned about gut health, insulin sensitivity, food quality, and really kind of, because of my personality, I was like, fuck, I'm just going to do this all at once right now, and I could actually adhere to it, where obviously the normal person, that's not always the best way to go about it. So I think for that, the answer is it could be both, but at some point in time, it's the people that just have the mindset that they're going to do something uncomfortable for a long period of time consistently, and that's why I think they can both work so well.
Yeah, I do think that people underestimate, regardless of which way they're thinking about it, they underestimate the challenge and, I don't want to say struggle, but they underestimate how hard it is to keep calories up high over your maintenance level.
Yeah.
Consistently. That's the key thing. You can do it for 5 days and take 2 days off, and you it's like you just did. It was a waste of a week.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, consistently over and over. I mean, it's worse than dieting, and I've done both. And I've had where I really kind of like what you did, where I really fucking pushed it because I was a 308 and I could never weigh 308.
Yeah.
So I had to always settled at 285, but then knew shit, fuck. 12 weeks out, I got to at least be able to train at 90 and then try to push higher. And just to get over 300, I was sweating all day long. I'm sweating when I'm eating. It's just, you feel your heartbeat just sitting in a chair. It's fucking terrible, but it's time to eat.
Yeah.
So I used to, the J.M. Blakely diet that I talked about before, one of the secrets was to eat like 8 Hershey bars a day.
Yeah.
The theory behind it, keep your blood sugar high all day long, and that way there's no fluctuation.
Yeah.
But what you could do is break a piece off and just throw it in your mouth. You don't have to chew; it just melts down.
Yeah.
It's like free calories.
Yeah.
Because but you throw it in there anyhow. Let's move on.
That's probably a good place to end it, I would say.
Okay. We can do that. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.